Hey there, we are rounding the bend on Bonfireside Chat, but we are not going anywhere because we have so many other shows on the network. If you're listening to this and you have not given Watch Out for Fireballs a chance, now is the time to go do that. We have just switched over to our new format, or are about to, as you're listening to this. If you like us and the way we approach games, then you're going to find so much over there, watchoutforfireballs.com. Also, if you want to write in for the final After Dark, write in at duckfeed.tv/contact by August the 1st. That is the deadline for your questions, your prompts, your just funnin', your thoughts on Souls in general, your thoughts on the show in general, all of those. While our Patreon backers will still get priority, we are looking for everybody's thoughts to kind of round things out and make that final episode a party. Once again, that is August the 1st, duckfeed.tv/contact. Thank you.
Some of our landings were desperate adventures. We are now prepared to meet the inevitable counterattacks with power and with confidence.
Surely you have seen for yourself the pain and suffering that fills this world. But fight poison with poison. You fool. Don't you understand? No one wishes to go on. I have had enough of this rotten world.
My name is Gary Butterfield.
My name is Kole Ross.
And this is Mitch Benes.
And you're listening to Bonfireside Chat. It is a Soul Arts favorite. It's a Demon's favorite, a colorless favorite.
Yeah, one of those. I'll select just one in the edit. No,
okay. Remix it.
Yeah. And you are listening to our coverage, our revisit of Demon's Souls. Again, for this kind of victory lap farewell season, going through the games in the reverse order that we covered them. And as you heard, we are joined by Mitch, a person who we have met several times. He's come out to a lot of shows, but it's great to finally get you on a show, Mitch. Welcome.
Yeah. Hi.
Hi.
Hey, Mitch. Hey. Yeah, as Kole mentioned, we've met Mitch IRL a few times. He's a charming and good dude, a gentleman and a scholar. Mitch, can you just talk just a little bit about how you got into Souls and why you chose Demon Souls to join us?
Well, I gotta feel like Demon Souls really chose me. Mainly because it was the first one in the series. Like, there wasn't another Souls game to pick. I, like many others, have this place in my brain dedicated to hardships in real life that I mapped on to Demon Souls. Because when it came out back in 2009, to set the scene, I'd lost my girlfriend, friends, house, job, been kicked out of school, was basically living on an economy of selling my own plasma and living out of my own car and wondering if anything was really worth it. I can say it was a pretty significantly low point in my life. It was a little bit weird. But eventually I got to the point where I just moved back into my parents', was trying to live simply and live in their basement. And I still remember picking up Demon Souls just because the way that I felt towards Armored Core, the way that I felt towards Kingsfield, those are games that I played when I was much younger, and there were big serotonin drips, and I felt like, oh yes, I want to get back into the From Software game. So I thought I'd give it a try, even though it sounded really hard, and compared to the games at that point in time, it was much harder. I mean, you think about like the Call of Duties of that time, and every game was super simple. You go to this point, it's way harder. And it wasn't really an overnight thing, but playing this game almost gave me a sense of hope. Not really because of the content itself, because it's
it could be
that
worse.
moment that I killed the Maiden in Black, I knew it was going to be all right. The encounter design, the way the levels are mapped, they're so fucking hard. Like, even harder than the rest of them in the series. I feel like this one pays extra attention to the way that the levels are mapped. you get to this experience where you have immense failure and then you barely beat it and then you go to acing it. And this repetition of loss, understanding, success, it really started to pull me back and let me look at my own self and do a little bit of tinkering on what I was experiencing at the time. You know, that sort of meta narrative of having nothing and then slowly gaining it all back with the experience, and knowing that it wasn't like the stuff that you accrued, but it was knowing how to encounter each situation. It really kind of unlocked for me how to start looking at my own situations analytically and learn how to better handle my own life. So, I mean, like, you know, just the act of playing this game, it's like going to a museum and seeing a piece of art that really speaks to you at a time and unlocks something new that you haven't said to yourself. That's really where Demon's Souls hits for me, and it's really personal game. So if you guys say anything bad about it, I'm gonna be really pissed.
It's establishing the stakes right off the bat.
Yeah.
I will take it personally. I don't have bad things to say about Demon's Souls.
No.
Like I didn't since I came to Dark Souls first, I didn't have that quite, you know, it was a second ran, but it's aged really, really well for me in the series. And like, you know, I still really love it. I find it really playable and relevant still.
Yeah.
And it's just, you know, we talk about it a lot, like people who have that kind of like personal hardship that maps onto a Souls game. And it's like, that's such a universal thing. And it's, you hear about that with other games. You know, I've heard people talk about that with, like Majora's Mask,
yep.
like sometimes, you know, things like that. But it doesn't come up that often. I think it's real special when it does.
Yeah. The closest thing, like the closest analog that I could think of is like depression playing an MMO or a JRPG.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but that is less about the content unlocking something or the actual mechanics of the game mapping to your experience or unlocking something for you. And it's more about finding a way to quiet things down. At least it was for me.
Yeah. It's just there's a way to not feel for a little while.
Yeah.
You get pulled away from the meta narrative of like the repetition and getting better at things. And you look at what these games are actually about. You know, it's understandable that people map it onto hardships in their life, because especially Dark Souls and on, there's this real question of everything sucks, but I really kind of do want to keep going. And I really kind of do want to perpetuate this world, even though it does suck. It's something that we have.
Right.
Mm-hmm. That whole something better than nothing, which like maps onto everything, maps specifically onto like suicide, right? Like, you know, giving into the dark and whatever these endings, like it is, you know, do you continue on with the hardships you have regardless of how nasty they are, or do you end it all? And like, I say that would never encourage suicide. This is the game where I think what the game is trying to do is get you to give in. Do I think this is the most nihilistic the series ever gets?
Yes.
By a large margin. Just tell them large margin sent you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And that's why it says so much about me.
Yeah. It is like thematically one of my favorites. I think it's one of the most pure in the series. Like I think that message ends up being kind of simple and direct, and part of that is because it is standalone.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and it is kind of simpler. Like there's kind of simply less text in Demon's Souls than there is in the later entries, kind of in every respect. There are fewer items to read. There aren't connections to other areas. The environments are a little simpler, so there's a little bit less in the terms of environmental storytelling. And they were still kind of figuring out what they were doing. So there's a little bit less there to read, but what's there is really kind of pure in my mind.
Yeah.
As far as an expression of that idea.
Yeah, it's a more cohesive voice. Probably, I mean, in hindsight, because they are not dedicating a lot of their energy toward trying to, you know, carry these attachments from previous entries in the series.
Yeah, especially coming back from a Dark Souls 3 world where a Dark Souls 3, I think, followed the Lost, the TV show, way of explaining things, where it's just like, here's more questions, forget all the things you knew.
Right.
This is very contained, very insular. Everything is answered as much as it's going to be, and is answered as much as it needs to be.
Right.
Absolutely. Like people oftentimes bring up wanting to either have like Demon's Souls 2 or having and you know, like doing a remaster and doing that 6th Archstone and stuff. And like it is doing a remaster where it is plays a little bit better or the graphics are better, I can totally get into that. And not having to haul out my PS3, yes, like that would be fantastic. But like I don't really want anything added to this narrative. No. Like I think this is at this kind of like crystallized in a real perfect state where like we don't get answers to everything, but we get answers to the important parts and enough to make like a really, really strong kind of emotional brush to paint with.
Yeah.
And I think if they did add anything as far as the 6 Archstone, they would probably map on second phases to all the bosses as well.
Yeah,
I gotta imagine.
They're gonna bring out all the new tools. We're gonna colorize this bad boy.
You remember Dark Souls 3? Well, this is harder, baby. Get good.
Yeah. Because if they did just put this out again, like people who are raised in the later entries, like people who go back to this, like I know people who just don't like it. Mm-hmm. And I know people who do go back to it and are just like, yeah, this is too easy. Because I think this is the easiest of the games. Like, there are a couple of spikes, but I find this one pretty breezy to get through.
Yeah.
With just a couple of exceptions.
Oh my gosh, soothing balm. Soothing
balm.
It
does feel really good to just kind of effortlessly sit down and because it's shorter too. So it ends up being like, it's like, hey, do you want to sit down for 13, 14 hours? And play through like a complete Souls game where you get to see this, like get immersed in this like really amazing atmosphere, get this complete version of the story. Still has that kind of like play variety that I value in Dark Souls 1. So replaying it is still fun.
Yeah.
It ends up being like a very compact package and like really easy to kind of suggest to people.
Right. I just had this imagery of playing Demon Souls like you would Journey or a game like that, where it's like, I think I'm just going to relax and play this fucking bleak game.
Yep.
Well, it's funny because Demon Souls and Dark Souls 1 and 2, I do like when I was replaying them with frequency when I first played them, it did become like a weird relaxing game. Like I would listen to podcasts and just kind of make my way through the game with a new build. Like once you know them well enough, it does become weirdly relaxing. In a way that like 2 never quite does, because 2, especially Scholar Onward, has a couple of like more difficulty spikes. Bloodborne and 3 never got that way for me, but I could play Dark Souls and Demon Souls and kind of relax, which is a weird thing to say, but I could, which is valuable. Like it's a cool way to express mastery and kind of knowledge of the game world.
Yeah,
I think.
Yeah.
Let's get into it. Let's talk about Demon Souls. So, like, just kind of demographic information. This was released in America in October of 2009 on the PS3, and it is weird. It is a Sony game. There's this kind of strange situation with Sony and Atlas putting this out.
Yeah. So it was initially published by Sony over in Japan, and Atlas kind of rescued it from obscurity because Sony didn't have confidence that it would play as well over in America. So Atlas came out and did that. But that Sony publishing relationship is kind of why this has never left Sony consoles. It is in the same kind of silo with Bloodborne at this point.
Yeah. Yep. The AKA the good marketing silo. like the non-obnoxious.
Until the re-release.
Until the Extreme Edition.
Challenge the adjudicator to a wing eating contest.
Get good. There's 4 adjudicators in one room.
The original Get Good. Yeah, the adjudicator just buds off a smaller adjudicator out of his wound. And just, oops, all adjudicators. Like he's full.
Out comes the nameless king from the wound.
Yeah. So, in this game, kind of the basic premise, you are a warrior who's venturing into this colorless fog that has consumed the kingdom of Boletaria in search of powerful souls of demons. After your first death, which the game very much encourages until it demands it, you are trapped in something called the Nexus and compelled into a plot to lull the old one back to sleep. This had kind of come out at a time. This is a spiritual successor to Kingsfield and kind of Shadow Tower, and it had been a long break.
Yeah.
Which, we talked about this a lot in terms of the series, and if they announce a spiritual successor now, like I like the idea that they can take some time off and reinvent things, or that they had, because then you get something like Demon Souls.
Yeah.
As much as we both like I think this is probably the largest concentration of like Kingsfield fans that have been like on this podcast right now. Like there's 3 Kingsfield fans in the same in the same call. Like that's significant.
I mean,
because
that's 100% of the Kingsfield fans. So
we have it. Like it's probably like 2% though.
Yeah.
Like it's that's an exaggeration, but it's still like those games are not popular. So it is cool to think that you could go from that, take a long break, and just totally reinvent yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Even from this thing that I have a great deal of fondness for.
Yeah. Well, I remember the first Kingsfield game. I played it as a kid, so a lot of the feelings that I had with the first Kingsfield game were about not knowing where I'm going. Were about this exploration into a weird, hostile world where I could die at every turn. That really was reinvigorated when I got back into Demon's Souls.
Mm-hmm. I had a really similar experience. Like I talked about this, I think, on the first Dark Souls episode, like maybe the first episode of the show. But I got the first Kingsfield when I saved up and bought my PS1 and played it, and there are a lot of things, like it doesn't have the textual element that Souls games do, but right in the beginning you can go into a cave or you can go around a corner, and around the corner there was like a slime monster, and it totally destroyed me. And I remember thinking, you know what, if I like spend enough time I could probably beat him, and then just sat there and like slowly whittle him down, and then was able to kind of sequence break. And it was a very Souls-esque experience for me to have at 17.
Yeah, because it sounds like the Phalanx.
Yeah. I mean, really similar, like kind of the blob design carried forward into what a weird first boss the Phalanx in. Like I love him, but it's such a weird choice.
Yeah.
Like,
hey, before you can level up, why don't you? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So what's special about this? What makes Demon's Souls Demon's Souls?
I mean, aside from the obvious that this established what it meant to be a Souls game, kind of.
This is a genre-making game.
Yeah. Like, this is, like, you're probably going to look back and say, like, oh, yeah, this might be, like, the equivalent of Doom, almost.
Yeah, Doom or Deus Ex or, like, something like that. Ultimate Underworld. Mm-hmm. Like, this is a genre-defining game.
Yeah.
Kind of regardless of how much proliferation the Souls-like genre happens, like, this is crazy important.
Yeah.
The kind of things that it establishes.
And looking at it outside of the legacy that it created, what you see is this kind of cross between, an action RPG and a character action game a little bit, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's definitely more plotting, more methodical, but like that's what they were working with. But they established all these things that, ended up being the mainstays. Specifically, I remember around the time this came out, everybody talking about the online mechanics,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Which just like we see little shades of that now in indie games. People talk about that. And that's such a neat idea. Mm-hmm. I think, it's always dangerous on a podcast to say anything was the first to do anything, because somebody will be like, oh, but this obscure game did it. But it feels like, yeah. So you get the actually squad.
A voice bubbles up from the well, actually. Yeah.
Yeah. But it feels unique, right? Or it feels like by the time this came out, 2009, I don't remember seeing games that played with kind of cooperation and antagonism in terms of their multiplayer like this fluidly.
Yeah. And to get into future spoilers for Souls Wins, the fact that you don't see action RPGs anymore, you see Souls likes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's even sort of sucked into it the Castlevania genre to where you don't see Castlevania likes anymore. You see Souls likes that are 2D.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's all kind of synthesizing in this way that it's kind of crazy to think started here.
Yeah.
Started with this. Like it's incredibly important. I don't think you can really overstate how important Demon's Souls is. And it kind of like, I'm kind of jealous, Mitch, that like you were able to experience it when it came out.
Yeah.
Because one of the things, we can talk about that multiplayer mechanic, but I didn't, by the time I'd played this, that was pretty dead, and that's kind of remained dead outside of a couple of like event weeks that PvP version puts on and stuff a year. The kind of returns to Boletaria.
Well, the thing about the PvP and the PvE part of it is they weren't afraid to try metagame mechanics, right? So I play a lot of PvP with Dark Souls being in the Forest Covenant. I mean, Dark Souls 3, I lived in the fight clubs. I love PvP because it's this really raw feeling of me versus somebody else that's that's human that I can't map programs to, right? I can't say this person's going to do this. And so it's this really raw feeling. And Dark Souls or Demon Souls, forgive me if I say Dark Souls every time, Demon Souls, they tried stuff that was different. Like I remember going in with a scraping spear build. It's a spear that has no PvE value, but in PvP, it just wrecks equipment to the point where you get hit 5 times and all of a sudden you're naked in the fucking battlefield.
Yeah.
I mean, it sucks, and you do it, and you get the hate for it. But there's all of these different weapons that do things outside of the normal build numbers, higher numbers, higher attack, higher this. They do different things, and I think that was something that they were really willing to try in the PvP for Demon Souls.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that PvP is always going to have, like, I'm generally don't play a lot of competitive games, but one of the things I understand, the appeal of it, is that, you're not designed to win it.
No.
Right? Like, any PvP or PvE or one-player game, it's made for you to win. And PvP match is not made for you to win. So there's always going to be a little bit more of yourself that you're going to bring into it. Mm-hmm. It's always going to be a little bit trickier, and you're going to have a little bit more of a feeling of accomplishment.
Yeah.
And it's really cool for a game to embrace that, and then also, again, the flip side, have that element of the way the PvP expresses itself isn't just in like fight clubs. It's not Double Dragon mode B where you can fight if you want to. It's got this they intersect. Right. It's got this invasive feeling as part of your single player game. Yeah. I've only been invaded once, I think, in Demon Souls. But at the time, because it is, I didn't know as well as Dark Souls, and I wasn't as experienced in these games, like it was terrifying, and it was, at an inopportune moment. I think I was in 4-2.
Oh, Jesus.
Which is a tricky place to get, to get invaded.
Yeah. Do you like
you have such a mission?
I hope you do.
Exactly. Yeah, like I don't want to fight outside, and I also don't want to fight inside. Like,
my hands are kind of full.
Here, this is my back. Just take it, please.
Yeah. If I can get you down to the slug pit, there's at least a chance you're going to get blown up by one of these gas spheres, and
you're going to get Will-o'-the-Wisp. Yeah.
They definitely tried to do, like I was saying, a lot of weird things. But even for PvE, there was actually a recommendation mechanic to where you could grade the people who came in for PvE and say, this person did really well, so I'm going to give them an A. This person gave a B or a C, and sometimes I got a D because people online are dicks.
Right. Yeah.
For dicks.
I never realized that. I honestly don't think that I've ever summoned anybody in for co-op in this game. I don't think I've ever actually rolled with somebody.
It just doesn't happen very often in the time we played it.
Right? Yeah, we came to it so late. I had no idea you could rate people like Uber drivers.
Yeah,
but
on top of that, like the PvP was a necessary mechanic. Getting into probably stuff later, the mechanics in this work so well with each other. Whereas Dark Souls you sort of have the PvE PvP mechanic as this ancillary experience that you can turn on and off if you want. Mm-hmm. If you want to do something with the world tendency and the player tendency, you have to interact with the PvP mechanic because there's just not enough times where you can change your player and world tendency reliably to be able to do that in one playthrough without it.
Right.
Mm-hmm. You have to really game it. And I imagine at the time when it came out, a lot of that stuff was unknown too.
Yeah.
So there's that element as well. Like now when a new Souls game comes out, there's like kind of legions of people who are kind of figured out the propensities, the kind of oddnesses and quirks of the systems.
Right.
These kind of the way that multiplayer reacts, things like whatever the equivalent of world tendency is in any individual game. At the time, is much more unknown, and that's something I think ties into the PvP, but is also kind of extended the whole game that I'm really jealous of not being around for, that kind of sense of mystery.
Yeah.
One of a really commonly repeated or kind of important factoid is that the wiki was hosted,
right?
By the people who made the game when this first came out. Like it was something where they wanted people to share that information.
Mm-hmm.
Because otherwise, fuck if you're going to understand world tendency.
No,
it's kind of a joke, but it is true. Like I would not have got it.
Yeah.
If I didn't have those resources.
Looking at it, with the whole series up to this point in mind, it is the most kind of inscrutable system that From has given us in these games, is world tenancy. Like, you can't explain it, but like, you look at it at its surface, right? At what it actually shows you, and fuck if you're able to actually like intuit that, right?
Mm-hmm. It really speaks to an interesting design mechanic or design sort of choice for the Demon Souls game as opposed to the Dark Souls on, where there was this art direction of wanting to put you into a mysterious place, like wanting to put you into this place where you didn't understand what's going on. You even had everything in front of you, all of the data, and it's still like looking at hieroglyphs. I don't know what this means.
Yeah, with a really, really low amount of contrast on those images, specifically like the world tendency map that you can pull up. And that's such a really interesting kind of intersection of UI and narrative theme. That's something that they carried forward from Shadow Tower and Kingsfield, this idea that not only is the narrative going to be about you being alone and in a harsh environment, we're going to make the player feel harsh and alone in every way we possibly can. And that's not just, difficulty with characters. That's also like strangeness in the world, kind of uniqueness, these like hostile mechanics. Like Demon Souls is more daring in all of those respects. Not only does the game unapologetically get harder when you fail at it, but there's all of the things with Yurt. When I think about one of the most impressive things about this, and this is skipping way forward, but Yurt is such a ballsy thing to do.
Oh my God.
In this game. Like that is so hostile and so like, if I didn't, kind of know about it going into it, and depending on, if this had been my first Souls game, I could just be like, oh, my merchant died. What the fuck?
Yeah.
Like this is just a random world where arbitrary things happen. It totally hates me. Again, shades of the real world, right? Like
it's tied back to a decision you made, hours and hours ago, worlds away, quite literally. And then all of a sudden, there are bodies here. Not all of them are bodies that that are important, but then boom, something important is taken away.
I like to think of Yurt as just like a house cat. You just start getting mice brought to you like they're fucking gold. He's like, here, do you see what I did? This is for you. It's like, God damn it, Yurt, I need him to buy stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's not totally unfair because it ramps up, with useless characters first, but it's up to you to kind of intuit the fuck's going on. And it's a very brave choice.
Yeah. Usually they're, games have murder mysteries in them. It's fine. Usually they don't take place and directly affect your ability to say, buy important items.
Yeah.
Like your spells.
And that's what's so daring about it. And that's part of that design ethos of like, and it's something that, I mean, here come like fucking comments, but like that I do feel like the series kind of lost is that idea of making things harsh in ways other than just HP bloat and high amounts of damage and boss phases.
Right.
That was something that contributed to the challenge of the game in a kind of an interesting way, as opposed to just like, oh, now, Sister Freya comes back or Frida comes back.
Mm-hmm.
It's just much more interesting to me. And the games kind of lose that a little bit. And it's really, really in full effect here. Like, it's hard to say whether Yurt specifically, like I could see that it's just on this side of fair to where it's a little bit of a gray line.
Mm-hmm.
But it is a way of increasing challenge and hostility without just making things balls hard.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's really valuable and cool. And I would love to see that. Like, I want more of that in games in general, and definitely in whatever From does next.
Yeah. Mechanical mystery, I think, is something is something that we see. It is at the core, at the heart of pretty much all the games in the series. Here, it is at its most, like you said, Gary, bold, but also its most like unapologetic, right?
Yes, yeah, ballsy and pure. Yeah. Let's talk about atmosphere too. So, like when I think about big things that this game does, that kind of bleakness that comes forward in the plot and in the atmosphere, like as I think unquestionably the most nihilistic of these games.
Oh yeah.
And how this game works to get that across, because that kind of ties into that theme of just kind of harshness and adversity, in ways other than just mechanically, or just fight wise.
It's accomplishing so much with so little, because in a way, as much as we talk about like going from generation to generation doesn't feel like that big of a leap anymore. This does look pretty archaic, technically, right? However, they do so much with what they have and what they opt to show you. And I think that leans into, like, this is a very effective horror game. I would probably say even more so than Bloodborne is, which is more explicitly horror themed, because of the sense of, like, just degradation that permeates this entire experience.
I know you guys did the Berserk manga episode. This is the most Berserk in my mind of all of the games. I mean, you have direct quotes in other games to Berserk, but this one feels like it, right? In Berserk, there's this whole idea that people are not enough, and they find these bellets, or Balet. How do you?
Balet. Yeah, the Balet.
Yeah. They find these Balets, and they are this sort of introduction to the demon world, where they don't have enough power, and so they use these to gain that demon power. And it's a real one-to-one comparison with Demon Souls, where you have characters like Maiden Estrella, and you have characters like all of those knights in Boletaria, where they didn't feel like they were enough to do what they want, and so they absorbed these Demon Souls, and they became these monsters, as opposed to the rest of the Dark Souls and Bloodborne, where everything is just monsters from the get-go, except for a little bit of Bloodborne. But everything's monsters from the get-go, and it's so one-to-one to the point where I feel like if at the end of Berserk, when everything's said and done and Guts has killed Femto and God Hand and is standing in front of God, he's probably going to kill him and end the world. So,
yeah. Well, it's that, but it's also the fact, so it does, the monsters are kind of human and change, and they also don't map onto anything.
No.
The way they do in Bloodborne. So one way that this is more effective horror is that it's not werewolves and then Lovecraft. Like some of the monster designs in Bloodborne are just fantastic, right? Like it's one of the great strengths of that game, but they're all kind of recognizable as a genre thing. It's really hard to even call, to say what genre Demon Souls or what kind of horror it is.
Right.
Other than that kind of Berserk comparison, there are things about things that happen in this that feel very Berserk, like in Latria, the people turning into those kind of two-headed, like I can imagine a Berserk comic where Guts kills one of those kind of man slug things, and it bursts into its second form, like the second face that is being subsumed by flesh until you cut it away.
When those big balls of prisoners in Latria too, like you could see that map directly onto Berserk, where somebody's like, here's all these people put together, now they're a monster, fight them.
And they're still people. It still has that kind of patheticness to it, and that's not something that you necessarily see. Like you see, that's a Grand Floon from Castlevania, more or less, but you don't see that in, like, that's not a genre of horror,
right?
The way that the Bloodborne, for all that I love it, like does map onto genres. Demon Souls does not.
Yeah, like the thing that struck me so much about this coming to it, after seeing the previous, the games that came later, like everything about Demon Souls hammers home that life means nothing here, and that has two meanings here. Okay, like, yes, there's no sense in going on, but also, like, there's just no value attached to life. Like, we are so far past that at this point. And each of these branches that you go down is a different short story about that thesis, it feels like. And just the different ways that it articulates, again, the ways that the people, who were under the whim of these demons and, who were the chaff for this pursuit of demon souls, the way that they in particular were degraded. Each of that has its own flavor attached to it.
Yeah. And it all, like, pretty much, so it comes through in those designs, right? Like, so you have that kind of expression of that idea that we are post conventional value of life, that comes through in monster designs. But I can't, in addition to that, it also has that weirdness and scale to it, to where, like, we are past life in a sense that it's meaningless, but also that we are bigger than that. So you run into these demons, and unlike a lot of the games in the series, like, do feel larger than life in a really huge way. The obvious one is the Storm King, which feels like an alien god, more so, like, even feels kind of mythical and beyond that, even more than something like Abritas does to me. So it's not just beyond it in terms of kind of morality and beyond it in terms of definition, but also in terms of scale. And that's something, that kind of offbeat nature is something this game does better than other games in the series, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just the variety, you guys. Just the number, how dense this game is with visual ideas and with mechanical ideas. We're going to talk about these bosses. A large percentage of these bosses don't just exist to act as a wall. Like they exist because somebody had an idea for like what would be an interesting way to tackle something, kind of not just by fighting it.
Yeah. Well, they don't overlap very much either.
Right.
Like looking at them all together, like it's pretty. So like Dirty Colossus and Leechmonger are pretty similar mechanically. Penetrator and Flame Lurker, there's a little bit of similarness to that, but most of them have like kind of different, like very, very strong different ideas behind them.
It speaks to the design ethos of the team, that they did so much with so little. That everything had a specific thesis behind it, as opposed to the games now where it's just like, oh, here's this big fast monster that's going to beat you up, as opposed to this big fast monster is going to beat you up with different kind of tentacles coming out of it. Everything here is patently unique. I can't, like you were saying, the Leechmonger and the Dirty Colossus probably feel the same, but I that's probably the only instance of that happening. You have the Flame Lurker, which, even though he is sort of a humanoid type monster, he's way different than those two. And if you approach it the same way, you are not going to do well.
Right.
It's I think that's a function of the ethos and it just being the first in the series. And that's something there is a marked decrease in as the series goes on.
Yeah. Still present.
Still present.
You have that ethic in something like Wolnir, right?
Yeah. They still do something like, it just comes up less often as the series goes on. And, it's early on, it's very, and that I don't really blame the developers for that. Like, how many cool ideas for bosses are you expected to have?
Right.
At some point, and they're listening to fans where they want very challenging fights, and without these kind of, but some of these bosses are such pushovers if you know the idea behind them.
Right.
And it has that little element that, is definitely present in Dark Souls 1, but almost absent in Dark Souls 2. And, again, almost absent in the next 3 as well, or the final 3, of just kind of like, I have to figure this out.
Yeah.
What is the idea behind this? And those are always my favorite fights in the series.
Yeah. You look at like just the archdemons, right? The massive, powerful beings that preside at the end of these worlds. As far as you can go. I would say that of the 4 archdemons that you have to fight, 5 rather. Sorry. Only one of them is like is designed to be a combat challenge. Old King Allant, right? Or Allant. Every other one could be viewed as almost this. I mean, anticlimax is the wrong word because Storm King, everything about that is climax. But most of the other stuff, has this kind of, distinct, understated kind of, gimmick to it, right?
Yeah. I mean, Old Monk is definitely a combat challenge, but it's a really interesting one.
Yeah.
And it's it has the bravery to be variable. So this could be it could be anything.
Yeah, and that's why I initially discounted it there.
Yeah.
Also, if you are online, the Old Monk could be potentially the hardest boss there is. So.
Oh, of course.
Yeah, in the game for sure. Like, but at least it's an interesting idea. It's an idea first design for bosses that I think is awesome. Like I appreciate it so much. Like I can't really overstate how cool that is to me. To where even if once I figured it out, so like something like you mentioned Storm King, which is one of my favorite Souls bosses ever, like even if I figured it out, it's always cool to fight because it feels so fucking like, I hate the word, but like feels epic. It feels like a cap to this area in this way that doesn't always come across.
Right.
Love it.
And in the case of Storm King, using that term, it's not trite. It's not like saying, "Oh, this burrito's epic." It's like this thing is bigger than anything I could imagine in this game. Like you fought the Tower Knight, which feels huge, but this thing is just floating in the air as if it's a force of nature, which is exactly what they were trying to go for.
It blots out the sun.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like anything else in this world. And if you aren't prepared, that boss fight is absolutely going to take you out. But if you understand it, if you understand the nature of the Storm King, it's not too difficult to take out. You just have to use the Yorm's sword.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's
the Yorm's
everyone's
slave.
fave. Yeah. My Yorm's glaive. Yeah, it is. It's really something else, and it's like when I go back to it, it's the thing that's most valuable. The mechanics, the kind of rhythms of combat and everything are all things I still think hold up, but are not quite as impressive to me generally, right? So like if we get into like nitty gritty of mechanics, to me it's a little bit of a mixed bag. Yeah. And even down to the individual mechanic, like there's things good and bad about each mechanic. There's nothing I think is a abject failure,
right? That's
in here. But like you look at something like the healing system, right? Which like, they quickly addressed. Like they feel like that's one of the biggest differences between this and Dark Souls,
right? In
terms of kind of the rhythm of play, and it's because this is a very conventional healing system.
Yeah.
Like to me, this speaks of not quite knowing how to innovate one aspect of the game the same way they've innovated all the other ones.
Yeah, it feels very traditional RPG. The approach that they have, which is just having this persistent stock of items that you gather from out in the world.
And it does, like, people complain about it. It obviates difficulty. You can grind for it, etc. I never really had to grind for it, and it's still something that I would prefer over grinding for blood vials. Like they don't get more expensive. Like it doesn't become. There are a lot of like kind of later problems. It just doesn't add a whole lot to me.
Right.
Like I generally, have 99 of like the lightest one, and can just kind of pop them when I need to.
I feel like it's not as bad as blood vials, specifically when you think about like when it came out. There's no Dark Souls before it. There's no anything before it, and so people weren't good at it. And so where are you going to spend the most time dying? It's going to be Boletaria for sure, because those are the biggest difficulty spikes. Boletaria 1 and 2 when you're first getting into it. Boletaria 1-3, where you just got done probably with the Dragon God, you're going to face another difficulty spike. And so you're dying the most in Boletaria. And so it was this sort of this game way of giving you what you needed to continue. So I think in the natural order of things, it probably worked out to be better than blood vials, because you spend a very small amount of time in central Yharnam, and then the only other place you get blood vials is in an optional area of Hemmick Charnel Lane.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's not, and you can always just kind of get them as well, right? So like they're gonna drop there frequently, which I think you're right. I think that is the reason why they have them so frequently there, and it's a good observation that they have them in 1-3 as well, because I never really put that together. But that is another difficulty spike, right? Like you're gonna go back there. It's also, they front load the game with them, because if you're looking at this as a conventional game, of course you're gonna go to 1-1 and 1-2. That's a lower number. Like that's going to be the easiest thing to do, as opposed to the actual difficulty order, which is like making the rounds.
Yeah.
Of all the ones. You can always get them, so it kind of becomes like a non-issue. Like it ends up becoming something that I don't necessarily appreciate, nor do I think detracts, really.
Yeah, I'm ambivalent about it. I usually end up having to make a couple of runs just to replenish my stock. I don't take away my amulet if you want. I have to farm for healing items, because I use a lot of healing items, but it is definitely I don't know. I like this purer expression of it than the one we saw in Bloodborne, which had the persistent stock, but also limited how many you could carry at any given time. In this, I'm pretty much just always aware of like what my stock is, and I know how to ration it.
Yeah, I think it also has to do with the design mechanic of Bloodborne, where you're always in the fight, where you're always fighting, and you're always losing life and sort of gaining back. And in Bloodborne, oftentimes you'll find yourself in a situation where you're losing more than you're gaining, and so you just have to you just pop it, and it's quick and it's fast. But Demon Souls invites you to take every sort of encounter on its own terms, and play it a lot more like a Dark Souls game, where you're going slowly, methodically with your shield up.
Yeah.
It doesn't invite that kind of getting into the fray, and so you treat your healing items a little bit more measured, as opposed to getting drunk on blood vials in Bloodborne.
Yeah, absolutely. Like that discouragement from getting into the fray intersects with other mechanics as well, because this is pre-poise.
Yeah.
So where this is something where not only are you kind of discouraged from wearing armor, but armor does not make a difference in your ability set really up until you switch into fat roll and the game becomes intolerable. Like I can't imagine playing Demon Souls heavy rolling.
No.
So you are a lot more mobile, but you're mobile and careful, as opposed to kind of mobile and reckless, as you are in Bloodborne. And the game kind of encourages those respective approaches.
Yeah. I was kind of shocked, just if we're talking about just like combat kind of things, how forgiving the margin was on backstabs. I would be I would be like standing roughly in the periphery of somebody, and then I'm doing this brutal like Devil May Cry, just ripping somebody in half attack on the back of it. Like I wasn't fishing, but I like what I caught. Okay.
The backstab and parry animations in this game are my favorite in the series.
Yep.
Like
with
the possible exception of the halberd one from Dark Souls 2.
Oh yeah.
But it's so brutal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like there's such a sense of impact of you just kicking that, like, get off my fucking sword. Like get the fuck out of my house, dude. Don't let the sun set out on you on my sword.
Yeah. And they're doing some tricks with that too. Like they're not afraid to like just really grab control of the camera and bring it in on that as well.
And the sound.
Yeah.
Like it's so loud. Like it's so loud, huge impact on that. And this was like, man, just thinking about first things, like this is kind of transitioning. I don't want to get back on aesthetics because we had to move on at some point, but how innovative and cool is it that this game didn't have music in the levels?
Oh my God.
That's something we take for granted, but it's so fucking awesome. Just like
sure.
ambience and, enemy sounds and everything. And it just makes the music matter. And like, I'm going to, I definitely want to do a type 5 on the music at some point.
Of course.
In this, but it's like,
when you're just sitting there and you don't have the music, it almost gives you a sense of insecurity. You go through a game and the music tells you how you should approach a situation.
Yes.
If it's that hero music, you're going to go in, guns blazing. If it's the scary music, there's enemies. But if there's no music, it's almost like being in a conversation with somebody at a party and you're both not saying anything. It's like, how is this supposed to go?
Yeah.
And it leads to this uneasiness about what's going to happen because in the past that you have gotten wrecked over and over again. And you're like, okay, let's see how this works.
Yeah. It is. It's definitely true that in most games, and this is something that, largely borrowed from film, and it's one of the reasons why I decry the filmification of game scores, is it's the music telling you how to feel. Like it, and a lot of games, the music does a lot of the heavy lifting.
Right.
For that, like a scene that might be laughable that is supposed to be emotional might be a little bit more emotional because of the music. But a lot of times it feels like, like if I was reading this, this would not have an impact.
No.
Like this is a little bit limp. The music helps with that. This game doesn't really do that, and instead lets you fill in your own feeling, because most of the time you do have that feeling of being scared that you're talking about, Mitch. Sometimes though, when I do feel like, okay, I fucking got this, I can replace that kind of emptiness with a, like an Eye of the Tiger style, like, I'm going to fucking do this. Like, no, you get off my sword. Just like that kind of sputtering anger and sputtering confidence.
Yeah. And
that music allows you to kind of put in whatever feeling you are actually feeling at the time.
Right. Or take this back to atmospherics. The fact that they use the sound channel to give you information about the world, plays into the fact that this is a little bit of a lonely wandering game. After you take out the enemies that are pressing you, you are left in the stillness and you're left to hear, just like what is happening in the world around you. And each of these worlds has its own thing going on. Like just the ambient sound design is amazing. You have the fires crackling and Boletaria. You have the steady drip, drip, drip in the Valley of Defilement. That fucking heartbeat in 3-2.
Latria.
We're going to talk about top 5 atmospheric keys in a game.
Just like I just like my heart rate was like just pumping. hearing that, like, it just, and when it goes away, like, I'm not sure which is better. Or the screaming. I forget the name of the NPC.
Lord.
Rydell?
Help me! Yeah,
Rydell, yeah. Rydell is one of my favorite, like, dorky things about this game, where, like, you're walking around, it's super scary, and then the shopkeeper comes in with a like thing, and it's spooky, but then you're just walking around and you just hear it's such a Muppet yell.
When you can't even do anything about it until you actually get further and get White World Tendency, it's just there, and it's like, okay, calm down, bud.
Yeah,
Rydell, I need you to chill out. Like, take 5, Rydell. It is that heartbeat is just like super incredible.
Yeah.
And it's not just atmosphere, it's also giving you information about the world.
Right.
So, like, hearing that singing, it's like, what's the source of that? Hearing that screaming, what's the source of that? Like, I need to find that.
Mm-hmm.
Is it going to be something that's going to kill me? Is it going to be a boon? It can go either way. And that kind of curiosity driving you forward is really, really strong in this game.
Yes.
Let's talk about level design.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Because it's very fine indeed.
Yes. Yeah. So I kind of broke myself or spoiled myself because I'm about, let's say, halfway through my Dark Souls playthrough. And, we're going to talk plenty of sugar about that. But so it's hard for me to put myself back in the mind of Demon Souls. So the fact that Demon Souls is not arranged around bonfires, it is not about these kind of rushes to safety and these rushes to, like, okay, this is my safe harbor now. Like, the fact that they just have these archstones and it's like, okay, you're going to go from the very beginning of this level to the boss. And you're just kind of going to have to do that and deal with it. Is a very strong statement about the designer's expectation of you, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, about their expectation of you, and then also, it's a strong. They build the world around it, in a way that is. I feel like some of the levels in this game are as impressive as they've done in this series. Mm-hmm. It doesn't always work. Like, you run into something like 2-2, which, like, I've got a lot of problems with 2-2. But when it works so well. And in a way, it is as impressive and cool as the interconnected world design of Dark Souls 1. Mm-hmm. Like, this is kind of an equivalent feat inside a level. Like, finding the multiple kind of shuttle run-esque shortcuts in Volataria 1-1 to get back there is as satisfying and impressive as it is to go back to the Berg or go back to Firelink.
You talk about the world design of 1-1, which is so amazing. I mean, the world design, or not 1-1, Dark Souls. The world design of Dark Souls is one of the best world designs in games ever, period.
Right.
Mm-hmm. The way that it interconnects and weaves. The enemy design and the encounter design of Demon Souls is better in my mind. Mm-hmm. The way that they sort of deal with difficulty as encounter as opposed to through enemies, right? I wouldn't say that any enemies that you encounter at the appropriate level are incredibly difficult, especially if you're a veteran of the games. But the way that they set them up, the way that they post them up, because they know how you're going to encounter a level, right? In Dark Souls, you can go around behind, you can skip Light Town altogether. You can do things in a number of different ways to where they sort of design a set piece, and then you encounter that the way that you want. Whereas Demon Souls, they have a lot more control over the way that you encounter enemies, to where they can skillfully make these encounter designs the way that makes them punishing, but not unlearnable, not impossible.
Mm-hmm. It's the Castlevania 1 and Castlevania 2 issue.
Right.
Where, like, Castlevania 2, the encounter design is not as thoughtful because you can come from any direction. In Dark Souls 1, I think they kind of have a foot in both ponds in Dark Souls 1. Yeah. Because Dark Souls 1 does that a lot. Mm-hmm. Actually, like, there are definitely places where they do know which way you're coming from it, and they do plan around it. So, like, even though you might visit the Duke's Archives in whatever order you want, you're always coming into that first area. You always go in through the vestibule and then go into the library and then continue on. So they can still plan encounters that way, but not every encounter is planned that way. And in Demon Souls, everything feels done that way. And I think that might be what you're talking about, where it's like the density of that strength, which I think is present in both games, is denser here.
For sure.
It's really, really good. Like Boletaria 1-1, I think is like a Super Mario Brothers level 1 almost like accomplishment. Like that's a huge statement. So maybe, but it's really up there.
Mm-hmm.
I think 1-1 is one of the best levels in games. Hands down, like really easily.
Definitely. I mean, even outside of the way that the level is structured to sort of integrate you into Demon Souls as quick as possible. I mean, you just think about it like from a design aesthetic, they know that their game's super difficult. And so they have to train you in basically everything that you need to know from the point that you start to the point where there's that first pit that you jump into instinctively. They have to train you in everything. They have to train you in everything that you need to know. And at that point, they're telling you, hey, don't just follow shiny things, stupid. But there's even this lore aspect to it where you start off in the same place that everybody who gets summoned into the Nexus starts off. And so those soldiers that you first encounter, the things that are set up to the barricades in that first encounter, they're all beaten up. The soldiers are hollowed. Everything is sort of torn away. And after that point, you actually get to humans. Like, it's one of the few points in the entire Souls series where you're fighting human beings just as normal enemies. And so it's like that first area where you're learning everything, that's where everybody's learning everything. That's why that's why there's so many dead people. That's why everything's so worn down. That's why the soldiers are worn down. That's why there's so many posted up. Like, everything that exists in this world exists for a reason narratively on top of existing gameplay-wise, which is why it's such a feat to me.
Mm-hmm. I think it was when we did our first episode of this, it was something like Jason Killingsworth picked up on as well, is that Boletaria is one of the areas that most seems like it is prepared for a hostile invasion, and underlines that kind of you are an invader thing, like this kind of subtext that becomes, text with Estrella.
Right.
But starts off as this kind of subtext that you maybe are not aware of. But the kind of design of it being fortified against you kind of hints at that early on. Impressive stuff.
Very much so. Yeah, I you guys are all hitting my points on this. So I was going to make the Castlevania 1, Castlevania 2 comparison. No, you guys just did it. I feel dumb that I haven't said anything, but I don't have anything to add. Like, it's like the clarity of focus, the simplicity of their approach, how helps them design this in exactly the way that they needed to make to convey what they need to convey.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
One of the and again, since we're kind of like part of this look back is looking at things in comparison to themselves, I guess it is probably good to talk about at least one thing that got better, which is like the upgrade.
Oh yeah.
Stuff like, which is even the fact that it's so fiddly and varied, I think is actually okay.
Yeah.
I like that you get heavy weapons, and then also like I can't remember what the other thing that's like heavy is. But I like that. What I don't like is tying upgrade materials to rare drops.
No.
Which is an infamous thing to hate in this game, but I think that actually rewards the wrong behavior.
Yeah.
In a way that I'm really glad they kind of gave up on. I think that Dark Souls 1, again, for me being the paragon of the series, like in a lot of ways, tied exploration and upgrades together in a way that is really awesome. Mm-hmm. Whereas this, by making, your sharp stones just be, from this one rare enemy, ties it to exploration, and then also adds like, I'd like to add a tedium rider to that bill. Pass the pervert Springfield Assistance Act. It kind of adds a rider to it that I think is unnecessary and bad.
Yeah. I like the variety an awful lot, because like build variety is great. And the fact that you can just roll around like, oh, what do I make with Mercury Stone? That's weird. Mm-hmm. That's that is definitely a positive. Grinding for anything is no good. Like, and I think that it's just a matter of they had to figure out which systems to connect together. It's good that they quickly learned which systems to actually attach to upgrades to actually making your character do what you want them to do.
Yes. Yeah. It has the effect of kind of having a little bit less variety than initially it lets on, which can be kind of a bummer. That also kind of comes in with the different builds not being as strong as one another. So not every build is viable.
Right.
You ask like what you do with mercury stones, and the answer is nothing.
Right.
Because like if you're going to set up like that's poison, right? I think that it makes poison items.
Yep.
It's not like a poison build is particularly viable because there are enemies that are immune to poison. It kind of doesn't follow through with that promise, but it does well enough to where it's like I wouldn't give up on that variety. I just wish that it went a little bit further and all of these different kind of paths were viable.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the thing about the paths there is that some of their paths were made specifically for PvP.
Right.
Like you think about the Marrow Stone, which does sort of the backstab path. You think about the Sucker Stone, which is the vampire path, or maybe that's the bleed path. I can't remember. There's some paths that are specifically for PvP. They're trying to integrate it with the system already there. And so it feels like it's not viable. And trust me, if you're doing PvE right now, Mercury has no purpose. But if you're doing like a gimmick build online, or if you're the monk and you want to just hit somebody with poison, which is pretty effective, especially considering what it takes to get rid of it,
right? And also the fact that the interface doesn't communicate that you are poisoned outside of the sound effect. Yeah. Well,
you poison somebody and you sit back and you let your homing soul ray take care of them. Like, that there's a metagame around it, but I think that a big part of this upgrade economy was lost with the PvP, unfortunately.
Yeah. That's a good point, and that's something that is good. One of the reasons why I like having people on the show is because things like PvP tend to get lost in my considerations, the game, which is my fault because I just play through it one player. So something like that does seem useless, but I think you're right. I think that is the kind of the idea. When you're playing it just through one player, though, it is kind of a trial and error to figure out that those things are useless, right? Like poison doesn't sound like a gimmick PvP build thing. It sounds like, I'm going to poison all these bosses, and then you get to them and they can't be poisoned.
Oh, for sure.
Which is kind of the bummer part. Like, if that is the idea, I wish it was communicated a little bit more clearly. Like, or I think that is the idea. I wish it was communicated a little bit better.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. Yeah. What else makes Demon Souls Demon Souls? What else we got to talk to? We made it to the Souls allegories.
We've already talked about the plot, so that's there. We should talk about the Nexus because that is tied up with the world design to this as well. But in the comparison, in the balance of these other these other kind of hub areas, the Nexus I think it's a bit of an odd duck, right? Because I love the design of it, I love the music. It serves a perfectly fine function. I don't know. It feels like a lot of big empty space to me. I don't know.
Yeah.
Like, just like what's your guys' general read on how successful the Nexus is as your kind of safe harbor?
Yeah, go for it, Mitch. You go first.
Well, I think the Nexus is one of my favorite places to have as a home base, partly because everything is there outside of like big upgrades. It's something that gets a little bit lost with Dark Souls, where you have to go down into the catacombs if you want a fire build, or you have to go to Honorlando if you want a boss weapon, or you have to go to... I mean, like, they sort of spread everything out with Dark Souls just to fit a more narrative feel. But everything was right there in the Nexus, which was kind of nice. There is a lot of empty space that goes along with it, but it kind of says to me, and I'm not saying like this is the best gameplay consideration, but it kind of says to me that there was once this sort of bustling Nexus that eventually deteriorated to the small collection of people down at the bottom, right? So you have all of those monuments up at, that's what they're called, right? Monuments.
The
monumentals.
The monumentals.
The monumentals.
I always forget that the monumentals are a thing in this game. And like when they say go up and talk to the monumental, and get like a bunch of exposition in this cutscene. That's kind of weird.
Yeah,
the monumental's a weird stop for sure.
You have all the monumentals that are there that are dead, except for that one that's living. You have doors that are closed up at the very top. You have a place where Yurt kind of hangs out to bring all his corpses. You have all of the stuff that sort of speaks to a greater Nexus that used to be. And I think that's sort of Demon Souls.txt. It's like this world used to be something, and now it's just this sort of condensed mass of really sad people where, like the crestfallen soldier, he kills himself in the middle of it because he doesn't know what he's there for. Mm-hmm. And I think it speaks to what they were trying to do. And I use sort of inductive reasoning for that, because you go back to Dark Souls 2, where they collected everything in Majula. You go to Dark Souls 3, where everything is in that Nexus 2.0. Mm-hmm. They really wanted to do that Nexus, and they felt like it was successful. I feel like it's successful. I can definitely see issues with it, and I think that if you were to compare this to Dark Souls 1, I would say that the world design sort of would speak to the Nexus not being as good as Dark Souls 1, but I think that it really conveys a world that used to be, and it conveys what they were trying to convey.
Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, I agree with that as far as, like, I like the Nexus, kind of how it takes its place in the world, kind of narratively, right? Like, even the big empty space makes it feel like something alien and otherworldly. From a gameplay perspective, though, I think it's a big pain in the dick.
Yeah.
Walking up to the monumental sucks. Doing, like, and this is gaming it, right? But like doing my suicide runs after I beat a boss. Like, okay, this is just the old suicide ledge. Everybody go up to old suicide point and throw yourself off the thing. It just kind of like becomes this time tax and kind of tedious. Yeah. And even finding, like, where is you? Like, oh, I sent Yurt back. Where is he? And kind of searching around for him, where it is this, it's kind of overly big area. Mm-hmm. Did feel like not overtly hostile, but like it makes it a little bit less successful to me as a source of sanctuary. I do think that it does kind of get across an otherworldliness, though, that none of the other hubs do. Perhaps excepting the Hunter's Dream,
It goes back to the episode that you guys did about Sons of Liberty recently, or right? Sons of Liberty? No.
Mm-hmm. No, it's Sons of Liberty. Yeah.
Okay. It's the one you guys did about Metal Gear Solid 2, where it's like Kojima, he has this way about him. And even if what he was doing, he was successful in the way that he did it, is it necessarily the right way to do things?
Is it worth it?
Yeah. And I mean, you're being hidden serves a huge sort of narrative, He's there narratively for a reason. Like, he's trying to hide so that he can do what he wants to do. But I mean, it kind of sucks because you never go there to begin with. And so you're going to end up with people dead. Like, the actual acting out of what's going on sucks, even though it fits with what they were trying to accomplish.
Yeah.
Right. So then it becomes an equation whether it's worth paying the price to get the cool thing. Like, you get a cool thing from this, you have to pay a certain kind of gameplay price. One of them's on one side of the scale, one of them's on the other. Is it worth it? And that's kind of the answer, or that's kind of the question rather there. Yeah. So it's definitely not, willy nilly. It's not arbitrary where these things are placed, but it's just finding that balance between wanting to find, fulfill this narrative purpose and wanting to be, a game, like mm-hmm. have kind of an ease of use consideration for it. Yeah. I mean, yours was just the first example that popped out of my head. There are other things that are less narratively hidden,
right?
That still like take me kind of a pain to find. Yeah. Like, even knowing that and people were going to be in those little water wing areas off to the right and left. Like, I missed the first time I could go over and talk to the disciple of God or whatever.
Yeah.
Just because it is a large area to explore. Mm-hmm. People don't want to hang out next to each other.
No.
There, which I get. But it is I'm kind of of two minds of it. I like it a lot. My favorite part about it, and this is, call me a bumpkin or whatever, is the weird floor that starts wobbling unstably when you have killed a couple. Like, walking through that on that, like, it makes me feel like if I'm on a glass elevator, I'm on anything with a clear floor, mm-hmm. I get instant and crippling like vertigo and want to die.
Right.
And it fulfills that. And just like the first time I stepped on that and it wobbled, it was no, fuck you. No.
Will this clock come up and devour me?
Yeah,
probably. Probably.
That is, and the way that articulates at the end
with the sword dropping down from that massive statue,
like that's incredible.
Yeah.
So that's visually my favorite part of it. The kind of like all of the extra rooms and stuff, I can see kind of two arguments for, but the main floor of it's really good.
I can definitely understand that. I mean, especially, God help you if you're trying to do Mephistopheles without a fucking FAQ. I couldn't even imagine the first person who, I have to kill your black character tendency, and then here's this random NPC, and then I have to kill everybody in the Nexus.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just that there's this level of mystery that goes beyond mysterious and into confusion, which I think is a real problem that Demon's Souls, like in towing that line, Demon's Souls really comes into issues with that.
Yeah. It's interesting too, because you can see what they're going for. Again, just because I've said this before, but Dark Souls 1 being the exemplar for me in a lot of ways, I think that did the best articulation of that, that kind of hiding secrets, where you get most of the breadcrumbs through natural play, and then it's up to you to kind of do something possibly unintuitive, but not impossible to kind of finish it off. Yeah. I think what Demon's Souls is going for is more, it's going to be a real edge case of a player who does this naturally, stumbles across it, then is going to go online and say, hey guys, you're not going to fucking believe this.
Right.
I ran into this NPC. Does anybody know who this is? And everyone's like, holy shit, I haven't seen that person.
Let me update the wiki.
It's like that Frog Fractions thing of like, not everyone's going to do this, but with a large enough player base, one person out of 10,000 will, and then it will become this super cool thing.
Yeah.
But it means that once it's already kind of known, it becomes the most boring thing in the world, where if you want to engage with Mephistopheles, like you're just reading a step-by-step fact.
Right.
So like it's really, really cool again for that kind of like that first blush, and then becomes less cool.
Yeah. And it's also a function of how chatty the NPCs are, or in this case, are not. Going through and playing Dark Souls 1 again, just we're comparing this across the series. Those NPCs are always telling you something about the world, or about somebody that they saw, or a rumor that they heard. Most of the people that you talk to, they really just kind of give their life story, and that's about it. There's not there's not an awful lot of like signposting that is done via these interactions, and NPC quest lines, because they are so tied up with the tendency system, they're kind of non-existent on a first blush playthrough.
Yeah. NPCs are very terse in a way that like makes it difficult to kind of follow their lines.
Right. I
think. And there's like other like minor kind of niggles in that as well, where like you run into things like in order to Sage Frake, in order to kind of complete him, involves buying him out. Dark Souls 1 does that as well, but it's not, I don't think it's great. Like as a reason to, or as a way to set forward a storyline, like, just like literally buy everything in his inventory.
Right.
I think it's a sloppy intersection. Let's get into some Souls of Grace. I'm eager to talk about these things in specifics.
Me too.
So typically the way we do this, Mitch will let you go first, let the guests go first, so we don't snake your things. And then Kole can go second, because we're going back and forth. And then I will take the third.
All right.
And we're starting off with what is the best area in Demon's Souls, Mitch?
Well, my favorite area in Demon's Souls is Boletaria 1-1. I mean, everything in context. The place that this holds in history, where games at this point in time were cakewalks. They were the COD story of the Call of Duty, story of here's the line that you're going to go across. We want you to see absolutely everything. We want you to engage in everything. And Demon's Souls is a completely different way of telling a story, where it's like, we're going to hide everything behind a level of difficulty and complication, and you have to want to investigate. And Boletaria brings you from one world of where everything is hand-fed to you and everything's easy, to the what we consider Dark Souls now, and it only has one level to do it. I mean, if you think about like what the bounce rate of this game must have been in context, it must have been enormous. It must have been huge, where people played this first level and they're like, fuck this shit. And then, the way that Bullet Area 1-1 introduces you to the difficulty so seamlessly without being too unforgiving is just, it cannot be understated. I mean, if you think about what each situation in the critical path of that level tells you, easy enemies are easy, but they can gang up on you. Right? You go through that first area and you can fight one dude and you're like, it's no problem. But then you have people hiding. You get 2, 3, and they can kill you right away. You go on and you sort of ramp up the difficulty slowly until you have this choice of fighting a blue knight or a red knight. And you look at the red knight and you're like, he's red, but everything else seems to suck. And you go find him. He kills you in one shot. And if your tendency is too low, there are 2 black phantoms that spawn right next to him, and so you can get really easily ganked.
Right.
So like it tells you that there are difficult areas that you can't explore yet. And so then you get a little bit further and you see some of the dregs with fire swords and you see barrels. And you can automatically start to put 2 and 2 that if that sword touches the barrel, you're going to get blown up. And and it signals all of the things that you need to know in this sort of slow drip, so that you're not overwhelmed by anything and you're not coming to it too quickly to where it's too hard, too much, too quickly. And especially the considerations that they made with shortcuts shows you that it was designed for new players too, because nowhere else are there that many shortcuts back to the first spot. And it all finishes with slowly being introduced to the slimes, knowing how they react, and then getting introduced to Phalanx and knowing how she reacts with the slimes. I mean, like, it slowly builds up exactly what you need to encounter in such a masterpiece level way that there's no other level in my mind that really holds a candle to it.
It's remarkable how, that everything does end up back near the beginning. To give you the easiest boss run in the game for the first boss that you're absolutely positively going to have to fight. That the entire circuit of the level was to get you around to open up that door. I think that is just such a wonderful mechanic that they built into this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And I want to kind of plus one thing that you said, Mitch, is not only are they telling you that there are areas you're not going to be able to tackle yet through difficulty walls, there's also that entire execution zone down to the left where they have items there. They're doing that thing where we're going to show items, but you can't get them yet to signal that you're going to come back here. They do that with the dragons. The dragons is the first set piece kind of obstacle thing you're going to fight. So they're introducing that. And on your way to fight the Phalanx, you can tell that you took my answer because you said everything I was going to say in the
you took my answer as well. So
yeah. Got him.
but executed. But not only on the way to where you're fighting the Phalanx, you run into those blobs, but you also start running into fire items there. So the game is subtly telling you like, hey, give this a shot. There's nothing like, there's no set piece where like one of the blobs shows up and then, a fire barrel falls on it and then it dies. But you do have a little bit of that sense of like, oh, maybe I should try this. Maybe this is not arbitrary. And that's something that the series would do, things like, finding the spider shield in the depths on your way, your way down. Things like that. Like I'm getting some poison gear here. Maybe I'm going to head to somewhere poisony next.
And I mean,
that begins here too.
Just to piggyback on something else I said before, where also ludicrously this area tells such a great story too, because if you think about what the Nexus means in the whole ecology of Demon Souls, where it's this collection of death or this collection of dead people who have to go out and do the Maiden in Black's bidding. This is where everybody starts, because this is where you get your trial run before you can talk to the Monumental, before you can go to everywhere else. And so you see those husks of soldiers who have been dealing with, new people's shit for so long. They're eroded. The barricades are eroded. Everything is eroded. There's piles of dead people. Like it packs so much into such a little space. That is just, it can't be overstated, I think.
Right.
Yeah, it's phenomenal. It would. I mean, it's telling that it was all three of our favorites. So we're all gonna say that.
Sorry.
No,
it's quite all right. It's just I'm just saying it's that good. It is absolutely that good. Cole, what's your runner-up?
My runner-up is actually 5-1. I like 5-1 an awful lot. I don't remember liking it as much on my first couple of goes through, I suppose. But yeah, I think that it is, again, the area that begins to support that thesis of you are the invading, you are the invader here, but you are not invading, an area that is military fortified, like Boletaria is, and you are not invading an area that is just like like industrial, like 2-1. This specifically has some of the hallmarks of life built into it that you just don't see in a lot of other places outside of like maybe 5-2, the tail end section of that. And so I think it is, one of the densest areas visually in terms of, telling you about what life is like here in this. And in terms of the play, the fact that you are kind of navigating these very narrow, treacherous walkways, and kind of dealing with these large assemblies of these kind of tougher enemies, these, people who are basically turning into, plague doctors almost, ultimately leading up to the gigantic ones who will just really, really mess with you. I don't know. Like, I think that, 5-1 is this, it's kind of a grower and not a shower. And I'm sorry for using that terrible analogy. But like it is a very subtle kind of indication of like some of the values that Demon Souls brings specifically to the Souls series that I haven't seen replicated in a lot of other places.
Yeah, 5-1 is really good.
Yeah.
Like it is unapologetically complicated in itself. And it's something where like kind of the visual morass makes sense kind of from a gameplay perspective, like it's to a purpose.
Yes.
Something
a little bit ridiculous. I never realized the shortcut structure for this, which was figuring out the proper places to drop off. Like the fact that from that opening area, you can make a drop and then get yourself almost all the way down to the very bottom of the level, that is hidden in that visual complication and clutter. The fact that I'm still discovering stuff about this is kind of speaks volume for the way that it's put together.
And one of the things that I think is really interesting about it is it's the only place in the entire Soul series where I can think of a merchant being posted at a specific place specifically to sell you something. Right? Like,
yeah,
she has plague things, and you're like, I haven't encountered plague before. And you get down, there's rats, and they're definitely going to infect you. And that's the only place, if you're careful, that you're going to be infected. And it's like, of course you set up shop there as a merchant. And no other game thinks about that kind of stuff to the level that they did in this game.
Yeah, and that character, that merchant, is really great. The con that she's running. It's sad. Like everything about the Valley of Defilement is tragic, but the way that articulates when you see her again, and just her utter antipathy toward this amazing person. Is I don't know. It all feeds into what I love about this game.
Won't you buy some more? I got my kid to put through college.
Yeah, I got 5 kids to feed. Yeah, it is. It's really good.
Yeah.
It is a great area. I'm going to say, and surprising no one, probably say 3-1.
Yeah.
Because that's the other obvious choice. Like 3-1 is very, very good indeed. I love 4-2. That's my fourth. That was my safety in case one of you guys picked 2. But Latria is it's actually something that I think Latria 1 never gets as good as it is the first time you go to it. Like if I'm making on subsequent runs, like it kind of becomes a pain in the dick.
Oh yeah. That's what actually kept it out of my running for this.
Yeah, it doesn't revisit real well.
No.
The first time I was there, it was so hostile and huge and complicated. And it has so much in the way, hearing Rydell, hearing the shopkeeper, going down and finding the gigantic arrow shooting, siege engine. The guy, the NPC you have to kill for the Fool's Idol, who's like, I'm not doing anything. Like, it is so full of like flavor and so harsh. Like this level, more than any other level in that game, excepting perhaps 5-2, took me to so many tries where I was like, kept getting, I was like, where do I even go here? What is the critical path?
Yeah.
Here.
There's no sense of direction to it. Which works in its favor on that first go through. But for me, who has I have a lot of trouble navigating some of these places. Yes, it is a pain in the dick because of that.
Yeah. Well, and you go back to the sound design of not having music, and you hear the bells of the mind flayers.
Oh my god, the mind flayers too.
It just evokes such this fear in you because you can't see where they are, but you can hear them, so you know they're around. And they could be in the floor below you, but it just all of a sudden you start slowly walking. And out of nowhere, some dreg from a prison just pushes you off.
Yeah. It has that. So it also has the peaceful dregs, where it's up to you if you open their cage so you can get the treasure inside. But if you do, every time you die and you come back, they're going to grab at the hem of your outfit, and that can stop you long enough for a mind flayer to get you.
Yep.
One of the prison keepers. Like it has a really good dungeon ecology.
Yeah.
To it in a way that's like really interesting to me.
To that point, the ones that are in the Iron Maidens, the fact that those are the most hostile ones, they're the bad boys, right? Oh, you're being in there, you're being punished for a reason because I opened this up to get the treasure, and boom, out comes a guy with a poison knife.
Yeah, exactly. You get tortured in a new way before we turn you into a weird man grub. When you have gargoyle, angels come down in the church and carry you into the experimentation layer of like the endless swamp and towers.
It's a man grub
presided over by a big cancerous heart.
Yeah. The only place where those gargoyles make sense.
Yeah, 100%. Like they're the best. They're narrative gargoyles. Flashback to speculation videos about the Ring City where people were saying like, this looks just like one of those gargoyles. Finally, we're going to get a lore, answer as to what those things are. And nope, did not happen. But it does so many things right. So it makes it paper over when I go back and I'm just kind of like, which key do I have? Which floor am I on? Which side am I on? Like it gets kind of annoying. The first time though, it was very formative, and it did something that not even, nothing in Dark Souls 1 had done.
Right.
For me. So that is why that is my favorite area, probably my second favorite area. So still would be 1-1, but that's What Mitch, what's your least favorite area?
So a little caveat, the way that I chose my least favorite anything was not necessarily on what was my least favorite to play, but more what I felt didn't do successfully what it tried to do. Okay. If that makes sense. Like, I feel like, especially since it was the first in the series, I give it a little bit of grace for trying new things and not doing so well, as opposed to trying something and not doing what it was trying to do. So for my worst area, I said 5-1. Because, I mean, like you said, you can't say enough about the ecology of the place. The atmosphere is just so sad and pitiful, and it's leading down to the Valley of Defilement. And everything is getting worse as you go down. And the inhabitants are just hanging out listlessly until you actually invade and, destroy their home. Good for you. But the thing about it that I don't like so much is this is something that we haven't really talked about. There's a real verticality happening in Demon Souls that doesn't happen anytime else. And the reason is probably because of this in 5.2, where you had these vertical enemies that you would lock onto automatically on accident, and they would make you fall off, right? So that first shortcut that you're talking about, where you push down the bridge, there's an enemy right in front of you once you push down that bridge, but there's an enemy on the bridge next to you that you're going to lock onto because you're closer, and because of that, you're going to accidentally walk off the edge. And that's not like a planned incident, right? That's something that is the cross section of mechanics that need to be worked out and ideas that are fully fleshed out but need to be worked out within those mechanics, right? And so I feel like while 5.1 I think is one of the stronger ideas, I think 5.1 fails on the merits of handling the mechanics well.
Yeah. Yeah, I could see that.
Yeah, I think that specific mechanic it does handle pretty poorly.
Yeah.
Right. Like you're much more likely to accidentally have a death that is not your fault there. There are other mechanical things I think it does really interestingly and kind of successfully, but I would agree with at least on that point.
Right.
That verticality is not a total success.
Yeah, and I can't disagree with you on that particular point, because my least favorite I'm going to name for a similar reason.
Oh no!
Sorry, Gary, get ready. You're going to get swooped.
It's gonna get snaked. No! I'm calling a bomb threat to Cole's house, so I can.
Wait a minute, my phone's ringing. 1 second. Hey Gary,
hello,
I'm talking
this
to
is
you.
Bomb. Hello, this is Bomb.
Hi, my name is Bob. Next time I see you, I'm gonna fuck you up.
Yeah. Hi, I'm the sheriff for being a bomb. Yeah. It's all bomb threats when we're not on podcast together.
Yeah.
Text.
Yeah.
It's all
we're making the biggest bombcast there is. Some sort of giant bombcast.
Yeah.
As
it'll be noticeably kind of beastly because of the Bloodborne coverage. Yeah. Do you mind if I do mine and just can confirm the swoopage?
No, you can confirm the swoopage. I'll come up with something else. It was all three of my entries, but
oh geez.
I'll come up. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just rubbing it in. So
yeah.
Please do yours and yes.
2-2. Holy cats! 2-2 is not a fun level, guys. I like its boss an awful lot. I love the visual design of our little bugbear friends or bear bug friends. I still want a plush of those. If someone on Etsy can hook me up. But yeah, like kind of no part of this works for me. In hindsight, from the mine carts full of the exploding will-o-wisps to the shortcut that is kind of their first attempt at doing this massive kind of you're going to drop from platform to platform and not remember why. Kind of thing, to the sheer cliffside that is full of those tunnelers, again with the lock-on kind of fucking you up. Having the flying little beetle friends who will just kind of like again drag you around because of the way the radial movement or lateral movement in this game works when you're locked onto something. Right. Down to just I can't stand those tunnels, guys. I cannot abide it.
The tunnels are a real problem.
Yeah. Like no part of this outside of the boss feels successful to me. I don't care for it one bit.
Endless fights against the gigantic slugs, where they can't really move, but also just have a counterattack and take almost no damage.
Especially if you go to that place right after 2-1, which you probably went to after 1-2.
Right.
You don't have anything that's going to do enough damage to where you're actually hurting those.
Right.
I mean, you're just going to be sitting there and wailing on it for a good 5 minutes, and then it's gonna blow you up.
Yeah. From an ecology standpoint, like Stonefang Tunnel, just for me, it feels really one note. Like, oh, we were digging and we dug real deep until we found something bad. Okay, cool. Like, and I like that you go here just to, like one of the primary things you get is weapon upgrade materials. However, this is something we didn't talk about, and it would very well serve as as one of our bummers, so hopefully I don't swoop it. But you run so afoul of the item equip in this just by carrying around a bunch of rocks.
Yeah.
The item burn by carrying rocks around in your pockets. You know.
I can't believe I even forgot about the fact that you have item burden as opposed to equip burden.
Yep.
That's nuts.
Yeah,
I'm
both,
glad they got rid of that.
Yep. Yeah, both. It sucks. It's no good.
It's the worst of both worlds. I forgot about that too. I was going to mention that in like the vestigial mechanics they ditched earlier on, but I forgot about it as well. But I'm glad it came up here.
Yeah.
I will say 2-2 was definitely one that I was looking into. I think that it is pretty unsuccessful because there's nothing telling those tunnels apart.
Right.
So you're going to get lost for sure. But like, it goes back to what I was saying about doing something unsuccessfully and doing something successful that didn't work out so well. Because you go down into those tunnels and you have this interesting mixture of tunnels that that they dug, and then tunnels that have basically a spine equipped to them. So it tells you that it's just a worm that rotted away.
Yeah. And
so you're going through the body of a worm, and then you're going to all of these people who are just going about their business and doing their own things. And I mean, like, there's a real dungeon ecology that I liked that put it just a little bit above 5-1 for me, but I can definitely, I mean, especially going back through it, if you die like midway through, you're like, I have to go
there's one
again.
shortcut and it's pretty long.
Yeah.
And it's available right from the beginning of the level and you don't have to do anything to enable it. Like it's just, you just walk over the thing. So if you're exploring anything to the left when you first leave there, like my biggest issue with it is how lopsided it is. It feels like it should have been 2 areas.
Yeah.
Because it's like, if you go to the left, you explore forever, we'll definitely get item burdened. There's some cool stuff to find there, but there are areas of that I've never actually even been to. Like I've never loaded up on fire equipment and gotten the stuff that's in the fire lakes.
No.
The lava lakes that's down there.
It's just fire upgrades. It's not really, I mean, those, it's all just if you want to get a +5 weapon.
Dragonstone.
Right.
And then if you go to the right, you do this kind of not particularly well executed falling down puzzle. That requires like more leaps of faith and has more dead ends than any of them that they've done in the series.
Yeah. The only reason that I don't think that is an utter kind of travesty is how forgiving fall damage is in Demon Souls compared to the rest of the game.
Yeah.
And guess what? You're going to do it again because the Fire Lurker is the hardest boss in Demon Souls.
Yeah, well, that's the thing is you're just going to keep doing it, and it's very hard to even memorize what the way to fall down is. Even if the fall damage is not so bad, there are still dead ends there. Like there are ways you can fall into a thing that you can't really progress from.
Yeah.
There, it's like I've jumped on the wrong thing, so I can't fall anymore. I can make this kind of crazy jump. to get there, and jumping mechanic in Souls games always works great. Like that's the platforming in Souls is always top notch. So like
chef fingers.
It just does not work for me. Even though the boss is a favorite. Like it's not my absolute favorite, but it is a favorite. So those are the two. Those are areas that I think are unsuccessful. 2-2 definitely. So this is I'm going to say my least favorite, but only for the sake of not repeating ourselves. Like and say 1-2.
Yeah.
And the reason
that was my
why
backup,
is
actually. So.
I think 1-2 is a cool idea, and it's not executed poorly. It's just so one note, as to be. And if you want to, it highlights dragon killing. So if you want to explore it, you have to kill the dragon. Killing dragons is something they didn't get right until Calamite. It is a huge pain in the ass to fight. That dragon, these ones specifically, where it just takes forever. You're just going to buy 999 arrows and shoot them. The kind of dash through mechanic is cool on your way there, but it's too one note. Yep. So it's way too short. It's kind of like the same way 2-2 is too long. Like a little bit of this level should have been in, I don't know, because all of the Boletaria levels other than this are the right length. So I don't know where this should have been, but
and if you're talking about coming to this game first, I think this was the most memorable area because that section where you, at the very end, right before the Tower Knight, where you encounter 3 crossbowmen with 2 crossbowmen in the castle, and then a blue-eye knight guy, and you can't back up because the dragon's coming. Like if you don't have your soul's literacy down pat, you're gonna die.
Yep.
And that's the end. And so you have to do it over and over. And I remember grinding on that area for hours and hours because, I just could not do it. I mean, now it wasn't as difficult. I mean, it wasn't difficult at all because I understand how to play it. But when you're first coming into it, there's not a lot getting you ready for that moment where you have to deal with so much so quickly. And it just sort of demands it of you. It's a real sort of skill check.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. There are the fact that it's too short to have another kind of shortcut, other than that. So it is a skill check, but the skill it's checking there is 2 things that, they're at least mixed bags. Like even if I end up, valuing them, which one would be slowly plinking off those characters through range combat, which is fine, like if that's what you do. The other one is just running past them. Which kind of sets up like a precedent. Like I like running past something when I'm on the way to the boss. I don't like doing it my first time through something. I'd rather like kind of engage with the encounter. This one, it kind of subverts what you're talking about with the Castlevania oneness of this, where the best way to fight those guys is from behind. And the trick is really just like not getting caught as you roll around to get behind them before the flames come.
Yeah.
So there's something kind of cool to that, but it's a little too late after a lot of pretty samey going through those dark tunnels, fighting pretty samey dogs, clearing kind of guard tower after guard tower. Like it just doesn't do enough special to me, and it is really, really kind of lacks a lot in comparison to 1-1, which is we really love, and 1-3, which I like absolutely adore.
Yeah.
Right.
1-3 is definitely in my top like 5. Like I love that feeling of kind of creeping around a castle that 1-3 gives.
Yeah.
So I have to say 1-2,
Right.
but it's still like I still like 1-2. It's just not, my 2-2 got snaked.
For sure.
Yeah.
Who's your favorite boss, Mitch?
Okay, so my favorite boss is the Tower Knight. One thing that I think that Demon Souls does a lot better than any other Soulsborne game, in my opinion, it is encounter design. And I think the Tower Knight sort of shows the best of the encounter design. So for starters, you go into the arena and you see this impossibly large enemy that you haven't more than likely seen an enemy that large yet. And so you go in and the cutscene tells you, okay, there's archers posted up on the walls. There's this big guy there. And so immediately you either fight the big guy and get defeated by the archers, or you run up and fight the archers. And you start to go into this mix of level design and boss design. And so you take care of the archers up top, and the Tower Knight's throwing spears at you from below. And one thing that I really observed from this sort of moment is the multitude of ways that I could take on the Tower Knight, and the multitude of ways that the Tower Knight could harry me based on his size, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whereas where I think Demon Souls really succeeds as opposed to the other Soulsborne games is the way they deal with scale, right? So on the top of that ledge, as opposed to Bloodborne where you're fighting the One Reborn and the thing's just attacking you with the top part of it, this guy is using magic. He's using a different skill set that you have to encounter differently. So he's handling you different based on where you are in the actual level. And then you go down below and he's got a different skill set. So the way that you try to handle him, he tries to handle you in a different way. And it's sort of this back and forth that you don't get with a lot of bosses, especially the big bosses. The way that they handle scale in this is, as I said, is great because it's this double-edged sword for him, right? So he's huge, so he can cover a lot of area and he can hit you for a lot of damage. But if you get him to a point where his size isn't working to his advantage, then it's absolutely working against him.
Mm-hmm.
And then you put that up as a foil to all the other bosses and all of the other Soulsborne games, and it's like you're fighting the Ceaseless Discharge, which is just as fast as any other boss there. Mm-hmm. The One Reborn, which is just as fast as any of the other ones there. The Ancient Dragon, which you guys know what that's like. The Cursed Rod of Greatwood. I mean, like, as they get further, they don't treat scale as this double-edged sword. They treat scale as it can hit you from further away. And like it's just a bigger advantage. Thing going just as fast. Whereas this sort of highlights scale as an enhancement to his verb set and not an enhancement to his specific abilities that would be as if he was smaller.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. Like, I like this boss quite a bit. Mm-hmm. For that, and it's also, I mean, just like throwing in a little bit of narrative theming, when a fat official comes out and does that chuckle and sets the archers on you is a great moment.
Yeah,
just like that is such a good fuck you, and it actually works. Like, I know I was kind of talking negative about 1-2, but it works in favor of that level because it's such a it's kind of a pain to get through that level. And to have somebody kind of kick you while you're like that, it's kind of, there's an element of impish assholeness that I do appreciate with that, because the Tower Knight is not so difficult, that it's impossible, but just kind of this thing that would be kind of a fairly one-note boss fight if it didn't have these archers, and then the game like literally kind of laughing at you a little bit there with the eminently punchable fat official, like really, really works. And the payoff for that in 1-3 is just incredible.
It's just wonderful.
Yeah.
The penetrator living up to his name.
Yeah, exactly. Like getting penetrated. Like, that's a great boss fight, and that's a really great moment.
Yeah. So for me, I was about to make a spirited case for Old King Allant, but I have to follow my heart here. So sorry for giving a runner-up there. I have to say Storm King. Like, it's so not a Souls fight, but it just kind of, I don't know. You said it before, like it's so epic, right? Like it's a gimmick fight. It is a little bit of a puzzle, but just the entire feel of it, of bringing down something that is blotting out the sky. It speaks to me, even going back to it, of a developer that was just like, hey, what if we did this kind of balls crazy thing, and then they never did it again? Probably for the better, right? Because they hit it, they nailed it. So yes, you are not engaging with regular Souls combat while you are doing this, but it kind of takes something that I love about Souls, which is presenting you with a seemingly impossible situation and having you work to get through it, and then coming out the other side empowered, and then puts it on the largest scale possible. It speaks of inventiveness, and it speaks of just novelty that hadn't run out yet. So yeah, Storm King. Like when I think of Demon Souls, that's what I think of.
How cool is it that there is the Stormbringer, like in a stone on this rocky cliffside.
Mm-hmm.
That you can go find this sword and literally just like use it to rend the skies.
Yep.
Like that. Like that's not very Soulsy in general either, but it kind of suggests worlds around it without explicitly explaining them.
Yep.
In a way that I really, really love.
Yeah.
And the power that you get from using that. Like, you make that sort of harried run to get down to the sword. You pull a sword out of the stone, and, in my mind, you expect it to work just like any other sword. And you're like, oh, now it's on.
Yep.
Yeah.
These things that have been harassing me throughout this entire level, like maybe if they were close to me, I could plink them with an arrow. But no, I'm just like, I swing my sword and they fall from the sky.
Yeah. In mass, like many of them can fall at once. Really, really awesome. And it's part of the reason, I mean, again, when people, who are frustrated by how much I dislike Yorm, it's such a different approach to that fucking like singularly magic sword.
Yep.
Like how holy is this? Like it is just like one of the best moments in this game, coming across this thing. And then just to like, oh no, there's actually two of them and they're in this other game as well. And they actually fight giants, not, things in the sky, and it's totally different, whatever.
Yeah.
It's such a respectful treatment.
Yeah.
That fight both shits on Yorm and the Storm Ruler at the same, or not Yorm, Sigmire and the Storm Ruler at the same time. It's like you're
double duty.
Everything.
Yeah.
It's almost impressive.
Yeah.
How bad of a moment that is. Like it's such
Best
a bad
boss in the
moment.
game.
Yeah. It is how much work you're doing with so little.
Yeah, it's impressive in the way that you look at a little kid and say like, I didn't know somebody could get shit that far up their own back.
Yeah, exactly. Like
I'm not even mad.
I can't even be mad at you, Billy. Like, Storm King is incredible. Like he's on my short list for sure.
Yeah. It really feels
really
like not mechanically specifically, but feeling wise like Shadow of the Colossus, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Even down to the music too. Like the music helps with that too. Which like we'll find a place to tie in some music chat.
Oh yeah.
Somewhere in here because I forgot that in the main part, but the Demon Soul soundtrack is very special to me.
Yes.
And I'm gonna cheat the same way Cole did, and do just a tight, let's do a tight 2 on Old King Allant because he's not my favorite, but I think Old King Allant needs to be recognized as creating the template for the duel fight.
Yeah.
That the series is going to do. Like this is why there's Artorias. This is why like even Nameless King. Like this is why there are those fights that everyone loves that are just kind of mano a mano is because of Old King Allant.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that needs to be recognized. Like I like that it's the only one in this game, really.
Yep.
Right. Like it's there aren't a lot more of these, but I think that that it's really cool that you can trace the roots to something that became such a big part of the series.
Yeah. The only fight in this game that is really similar to that would be Penetrator, but that has its own kind of mitigated circumstances to it.
Yeah. Yep. For my favorite, I'm going to say Old Monk, which varies wildly in its experience. So it's a little bit tricky like that, but it's such a clever intersection of, PvP or kind of meta mechanics with an actual boss fight. It's also thematically exactly my thing. The idea that it is not actually, it's actually the cloak, like it's actually the cloth that's the boss.
Yeah.
Not this king. Like that is too cool for words for me.
Yep.
And then the arena with all the chairs stacked up, like just kind of chaotically, that speaks to me on a very fundamental level. Getting summoned as the old monk is so fucking fun.
Mm-hmm.
It's only happened to me once or twice. I might be confusing a mirror squire experience. So it's definitely happened to me once. It's either once or twice, and it's very, very cool when it happens.
Well, that was actually the first time that I encountered that boss battle. I didn't fight it before I became the old monk.
Oh,
like
God.
I was going in.
That's awesome.
I was going in to try and help with the next boss because, one thing that I'd learned from the Man-Eater is that it's a good idea to see what you're going into before you're going into it.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So I put down my summoning sign and got summoned as the old king and was just taken back by it. Like, what?
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 Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I definitely got killed that first time, but it was like going into that kind of stuff cold. Like, man, you just can't say enough about the innovation that they did with this game.
Mm-hmm.
It's really, really clever, and it's not 100% a success because sometimes you get the NPC version, which ends up being a little bit like thematically cool, but a little bit less than as a fight. Sometimes you get some kind of somebody who is like ultimately spec'd for PvP, and it can be a real like roadblock. It's like, this person has been engaging with the system the entire game, and I have not at all, and it feels a little bit unfair.
Yeah.
But when it hits the right balance, you fight somebody who's roughly as good as you are, or maybe a smidge better. It can be, really, really transcendent. So it has the ability to be, mechanically the strongest fight in the game. And also, again, those thematic reasons and just how clever it is.
Yeah.
Like, I really respect how, like, innovative and cool it is, like you were saying, Mitch. So that is why Old Monk is my number one.
Yeah, Old Monk was my runner-up.
Yeah, mine too. He's really good. Also Miyazaki's favorite, so means something.
Yeah, as well he should be.
Hey, Mitch, what's your least favorite boss?
Yeah, who sucks? Who's unsuccessful?
Well, they're all my children, and they're all my favorites. No, the false idol, I think.
Oh,
interesting.
I really like the idea. I think it does a lot of interesting things. There's a couple things that does really well is the dregs worshiping the true false idol, sort of figuring out that that's how you can tell which one you should attack, and dregs falling over the traps, knowing that you should keep those guys alive. But I feel like if you don't have that, if you go into the fight blind, you're going to kill all the dregs before you get up there. And then you're going to have the traps on the floor and you don't know where they are. And it's not telegraphed well. So you kind of have to guess if this is a trap that I'm walking over. And if you walk over a trap, you're probably going to die. And then if you go in there the first time and you didn't explore the right side of where the NPC is, then you resurrect her. And I mean, while all of these things, while it's cool, it's a cool kind of gimmick, and it's a cool kind of trap system, and the story behind the boss is really cool. If you're coming into it blind, it's hard to figure out what you're supposed to do. And I don't feel like it's telegraphed especially well. And I feel like it has too high of a penalty for failure. So that's really my biggest reason. And if you actually do get up to her, she's really easy to kill.
Yeah.
Kind of like pinwheel level.
Yeah, it's kind of to me, I like this boss. I think it's more of a successful version kind of Pinwheel, but I don't think you're wrong about those things. I think the fact that it's so easy ameliorates some of those issues. Mm-hmm. Like it's and it could just be when I happen to be here, like when I happen to go here, because it was getting paralyzed was never a death sentence for me in this fight. Like I always had enough to kind of run around and heal back up.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I can see that being frustrated, and it doesn't really signal that she's being, it's very sloppy. Like when you kill her with the resurrection thing active, like it just kind of tells you, there's something else to do. That you kind of have to, kind of find it. So it's a little bit sloppy. I think I appreciate it though, because it's weird and it kind of overrides that a little bit for me.
Yeah.
Like,
and I think
but I definitely see your point.
She's pretty cool too.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, she's great. Like it's a really cool idea. And the music's really great.
Yeah.
On her as well. Just really, subtle and kind of light touch.
Yeah, it's a standout track for like what Demon Souls does that most other entries in the series don't do. They abandoned that subtlety so quickly.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Who's your least favorite, Cole?
Man-eaters. I hate this fight. It sucks. I said that in the top 10 worst boss fights, and I'll stick to that. I don't like the man-eaters one bit for similar reasons. Due to like with the lock on and falling off, man-eaters probably holds the distinction in the series for being up there in terms of the number of times I've died where it really definitely doesn't feel like it was my fault. Some of the systems and the feel were just not there to where you would have this fight with something that can just fly around and knock you off of this precarious kind of ledge. I think that, the ideas are there and fine. I like their visual presentation on it. I like that you can cut off their tails and, remove some of their abilities. But just the way that it executes, no matter what kind of build I've brought to it, and no matter when I've come to it, it has felt like an unreasonable wall compared to other stuff. Yeah, man-eaters, no good.
It also has the unpleasant distinction of being obviated by a boss that comes later.
Mm-hmm.
So if you look at something like Fool's Idol, I think that Fool's Idol is a more interesting and probably better boss than Pinwheel.
Mm-hmm.
And you look at Tower Knight, and Tower Knight is definitely a better boss than One Reborn.
Yes.
Belfry Gargoyles are better than Man-Eater, though.
Mm-hmm.
It's a really similar idea, but it's just executed much better.
Yeah.
So it's something they actually evolved and got better rather than just kind of rehashed or actually made worse.
Right.
Yeah, I think Man-Eater, a big problem with that is that it's in a series that's notable for its lack of RNG and lack of randomness. It's one of those things where you're really at the whim of randomness. Like if they fly up in the air, what are you going to do? You can't do anything.
Yeah.
They'll just do it.
If you're not spec for sorcery, well, fuck you.
And I love that this game has flying enemies, right? Like that's something they literally just gave up because they cause all these problems. And I like that about this, but that boss has definitely one too many things going on.
Yeah.
Like him being joined halfway, the shaky footing, the flying, like every time, like I have gotten to the point where I can pretty consistently kill Man-Eater, but it's always kind of just cheesing around the fountain.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that's not that fun. What was that, Mitch?
That's the way you have to do it.
Yeah.
I will say one saving grace to the Man-Eater, I think the track is especially standout. It feels like those old sort of claymation movies with like Jason and the Argonauts.
Yeah, Clash of the Titans kind of thing.
Yeah, where the song is, it feels like old movie-ish. It feels like you're fighting in an old timey. There's no other way I can explain it. But definitely worth a listen.
Yeah, I definitely see that. I'm going to make us talk about the soundtrack after we get through worst bosses.
Yeah.
So, actually, I can save that for my great things too.
Yeah.
That makes sense. It can fit there. I'm going to give worst boss to Leechmonger.
That was my runner-up.
Yeah.
Everybody's runner-up.
If you thought that the Dirty Colossus has too many ideas, it's time for the Leechmonger to start monging it up. There's just nothing to this boss, and you can see them struggling with that area because for Maiden Estrella, which got shunted into my moments section as opposed to bosses because I love Maiden Estrella, but that area can't have personalities to it really.
No.
For that to work, it kind of has to be this desolate area with one person who is questionably doing good. It would be weird to have Maiden Estrella as lieutenants or to have the king, the evil king of the swamp still be in power or something, which is the closest I think we ever came to thinking what these things could even be. But that's not very interesting. Right. So they just had to, for the first time in this game, they had to just make monsters.
Yeah.
And Leechmonger and Dirty Colossus just seem to be monsters. And Dirty Colossus at least has that idea where he sends flies out at you. Leechmonger, you can literally kill without him getting a hit if you have a ranged weapon. And even if you don't, you just stand next to him and hit him.
Yeah.
There's nothing to it. And I've never hate something because it's too easy, but I can hate something because it's too boring.
Yeah, it's brain dead.
Yeah, it is a brain dead boss fight, which has very bad theming and almost no lore to it. Or kind of interesting backstory to it.
Yeah.
So Leechmonger I think sucks pretty bad.
Yeah. Leechmonger is What if there was a spirally arena? Oh wait, we did that with Adjudicator? Well, fuck.
I think the idea too is that Leechmonger regenerates.
Yeah.
But doesn't regenerate fast enough to be a problem.
Mm-hmm.
So it could just be like a numbers thing. But even if it is, like, regenerating health is not that interesting to me. You know, it could be if it was like, oh, like, you know, it does these kind of AoEs. You have to get away, and the cost for that is that it's more likely to heal up, so you spend more time. Like, it just doesn't present interesting choices.
No.
I guess for me, with the Leechmonger and Dirty Colossus especially, like, and this might be a headcanon type thing, but I feel like no enemy in the Valley of Defilement gives you very many souls. No enemy is very hard on its own terms. I mean, even the giant depraved ones, if you're on stable footing, you can take them down pretty easily. They have huge wind-up. They're really slow. But you're always in the Valley of Defilement, this pit that you have nothing to mitigate with. You know, you don't have an iron rust ring, and so you're dealing with these giant depraved ones the same way that everybody else is dealing with the Valley of Defilement. And it really feels like the thesis of that whole place is the real boss is the level itself, right? There's no harder encounter than dealing with the poison in the movement tax that you take and the people who propagate within the Valley of Defilement. I mean, there's that one item that you go out and get, and it's clearly a trap because there's a black phantom sitting on top of it that's going to get you. You know, so it's like everybody is sort of dealing with the same sort of shitty place that you're dealing with. And so the bosses aren't that tough just because they're so weak from taking on the valley itself. Yeah. Which makes it a really interesting boss. And I mean, that could be completely my interpretation and not the designers are like, I never intended for that. But that's kind of the way that I see it, and the way that I don't put Dirty Colossus and Leechmonger as my 1A and B.
Yeah. Yeah. You had to bring a lot of your own kind of guessing, you know, or kind of like theorizing to make him have a place in the world, really. You know, so I think that's a cool headcanon. It's also like, you know, there's just not anything. There's like one piece, only his soul refers to him, you know, so you end up having to spend kind of a lot to get there, which I'm not saying that as a criticism. It just is part of why he ends up being kind of narratively unsatisfying for me.
Yeah,
for sure.
You have to round up pretty far to get there. And then at the end of the day, it still ends up not being a very good fight. So like, even if you can square the circle with him thematically, he still ends up not being super fun. Even if the idea is he's easy on purpose, you know, it's still like, well, right. You know, I still just had to go and hit a blob. You know, it's really bad visual design too. Yeah. Like a big pile of crap, you know?
Yeah. I can see it. I can see it now. Twitter being ablaze. Gary hates it because it's easy.
Yeah, exactly. I'm confused. See, you seem to think that
you spent 9 months talking to.
Yeah.
Sorry to get into the hypothetical person. I'm sorry to give you the idiot voice.
It's that's an arrow in my quiver. I don't like to dispatch very often.
Yes.
What are three great things about this game, Mitch? And this can be kind of mechanics. This can be moments. This can be songs. This can be things from previous categories. This can be pretty much anything. But what are three awesome kind of ineffables not covered so far in Demon Souls?
Sure. So my first Souls thing is the mystery. I think it has mystery more than any other Souls game. Even the ones that don't fill in all the answers, it has this air of mystery because you're going into it, you have no idea what's going on, and you go into a new area, and all of a sudden you have so much input to take in, right? Because every area is distinct from one another. Every area is different. They have their own dungeon ecology. They don't even, I mean, you can argue there's a lot of sameness within specific archstones, but like you go to 4-1, and that's way different than 1-1, and that's way different than 2-1, and way different. Like there's a different thesis to all of them. You go in, there's no exposition, no NPC that's holding your hand. All you have is that new world and looking at how everything operates within it. But you keep moving forward because it is so interesting. And you know that there is enough to go on that you can flesh out this world thesis. In many ways, it's kind of like a proto Dark Souls 2, where there are these spokes, and each of them is a different story about what happens when a demon soul sort of takes hold within that area.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, put that on top of the fact that the world changes without you. We talked about Yurt before being the Nexus cat, just bringing dead people to you and being like, here you go. This is for you. And you had to sort of figure out what that was without anybody else. I mean, even now, if you go on and you look at the YouTube videos and you look at the wiki, you can see, if you go to any of the other games, there's Vadi Vidya, there's Lobos, killing the game with a ladle. There's everything under the sun. But this last run that I went through, I wanted to make a Moonlight Greatsword build, and I couldn't find it. And the only video that showed me where it was in a succinct manner was literally this guy who videotaped his CRT TV. Even today, there's this real feeling of sort of talking at the playground to sort of get your information for Demon Souls.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, well said. Yeah, I agree.
For the next win, I have the dungeon ecology. Being a D&D nerd, I love when a DM takes into account what monsters he's putting into the dungeon and why they're there. And so you have the inhabitants of all of these places, and they make sense, and they have this internal logic. In Boletaria and Shrine of Storms, you have these enemies who are posted up behind barricades because there's a reason. Mm-hmm. 1-1 we talked about where it's player characters going in. 4-1, we didn't talk about it this time, but I know it was said on your podcast before. There's this question of, well, this seems to be a place where the church has been going in. Mm-hmm. So there's a reason why these people are posted up and guarding this area to stop people like what's the church guy? Saint Urbane coming in. Mm-hmm. And then you go into a place like 2-2. And while I think we can agree that's a less successful world, there's a dungeon ecology to it. Those people aren't necessarily violent. They're just kind of going about their jobs. They're kind of doing their thing, which is something that you don't see in any of the other Soulsborne games. You take it into context with some current games like The Surge. I know you guys have talked about that. I know you haven't played it. I played through that, and it seems like everybody's job there was just standing behind boxes waiting for somebody to come by. People mm-hmm. don't take that into account now, and it was refreshing coming back to it and seeing enemy placement being successful on its own terms, but also successful in a narrative term as to what was this world trying to tell us and what was happening within this world.
Mm-hmm. I think this game does that really, really well. Specifically, I think Dark Souls 1 does that well as well.
Yeah, for sure.
But this game does it. It is definitely something that the series got worse at with Dark Souls 2, and then kind of continued to not be great at. So it is really going back to this or Dark Souls 1, getting that feeling of that's really strong.
Well, in Dark Souls 2, they had to make a literal remaking of the game to make things make more sense.
Yep.
Yeah, they patched in this thing that the game had done in a way that feels like not effortlessly, but like very natural and smooth.
Right.
Earlier on.
And then my last win is the Legacy. I mean, I think this really goes without saying. You have the popular Dark Souls, just like you have Super Metroid and Super Mario World and Castlevania's Symphony of the Night, but you have Demon Souls like the originators of those games, like the Mario World, like Metroid, like Castlevania. And for better or for worse, it has changed the ARPG landscape completely. You don't have ARPGs anymore. You have Souls-likes. Mm-hmm. And the difficulty in games is now a selling point and not a detractor. You have games that are banking on ambient storytelling as a back-of-the-box quote. You have, you have bonfire-side chats. There are so many things dedicated to this series and all of the things that came from it.
Yeah. Yeah, it is literally the beginning of a cottage industry.
Yeah.
You know, I use that term a lot, but like us, you know, your body's Vidya, your Dave's Control, like it is something that people have gone on to make careers out of.
Yeah.
Which is a weird thing to think, and it started here.
Yeah.
You know, huge impact.
You know, on a more wide scale, when you look at that legacy, how many times have we heard the same story, which is, well, I just can't look at action games the same after having played Dark Souls. I can't look at games the same after playing, you know, insert Souls game here. And the
glasses from They Live.
Right. This is the start of that. You know, we cite Dark Souls because that is, you know, the longer running series, and it's the one that we got started with. But yeah, like, you know, there are plenty of people in our community who are like, yeah, that was old hat by the time Dark Souls came around. Like, we were already there by the time you Johnny come latelys hopped on.
Yeah. Good answers.
Yeah.
What do you got, Cole?
Mine are decidedly smaller. And to highlight that, I'm going to bring forward just one small little moment here. When you're talking to Blacksmith Ed, which is the kind of varsity level blacksmith who you find in 2-1, kind of that hidden elevator area. He has a very hammy kind of dialogue presentation that he does. You know, he's this cranky old guy. There's one particular line after you give him the fire, like the flaming demon soul from the Flame Lurker, where he says, and I'm going to cut it in here, and if you guys want to listen to it, you can.
You've done well to put your trust in the great blacksmith Ed. Bring me a demon soul.
Be gone with ya.
He says it like he's already the strongest man in the world.
Don't eat metal. Don't eat metal!
Still a Viking? Bring me a demon soul!
Yeah, so that's super dumb, but like, you know, I had a couple of drinks, it was like really late at night, and I got that, I was like, I have no recollection of that.
You look like a bona fide Dirty Colossus sickle man. Yeah.
I gotta feel like Dirty Colossus is in the Urban Dictionary.
Oh, God.
Oh, 100%. I'm going to check on that while Cole finishes talking about that line delivery.
Please do. Yeah, so, I mean, this is not a very goofy game in general. You know, there are some goofy elements to it. You know, in some places, that
legendary Big
line,
M.
What's that?
Like the legendary Big M.
Big M.
Like the guy who owns the God Hand, like the legendary, said to be known by the legendary Big M.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So there's a little bit of that there, but that to me, like on this most recent playthrough, it doesn't say anything like broad about the game itself. But I laughed for a good 3 minutes straight. I think I just kept on hitting talk, trying to trigger it over and over again. On something that is of a little bit more consequence, something that I think is a real win for this, the Thief's Ring.
Yeah. Stealth elements.
The stealth elements are pretty huge, and that is an incredibly powerful ring, probably up there in the most powerful rings in the in the series, for how much it actually changes the course of your playthrough. And it just breaks shit. And again, this is one of those rough edges that would be sanded off over the course of the series as it would go on. You don't see things like this in Souls games anymore. But once you find that, after making that kind of leap of faith back behind Ostrava, it is very much worth using, and can inform your playthrough in a huge way after it.
And somewhat mandatory, especially in like 4.1 and 2.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, you can't like 4.2 without it is an absolute nightmare.
Yeah. And my third one here, we talked about it a little bit, but 4.2 specifically with the heart before and after.
3.2.
Yeah, 3.2. Sorry, blah. We just said 4.2, didn't we? 3.2 with the gigantic heart in the tower. The lore behind that it is the the queen or what remains of her. When you kill those supplicants who are worshiping to keep those chains suspended, and it falls down and all of those man scorpion things start crawling out of it. Just everything that heart does to that level before, during, and after, makes that, kind of a standout, atmospherically, even if the play in that level leaves something kind of to be desired, you know. There's definitely the play is not as strong as the atmosphere, and that heart is at the center of it.
Yeah, that heart moment, that heart dropping is a great moment.
Yeah.
In this game, it's so gross, and it's a really good little Lovecraftian bit that is stands in contrast. So like by the time that happens in Bloodborne, it's still a very cool moment when you have the gigantic frenzy tumor, but it is it's not the only squamous thing like that you see in the game, and this feels like it stands out like a lot.
Yeah,
that's really good.
That area especially has its issues, but it's just the feeling that all of the things in that area evokes overcome any sort of qualms I had with the playability. I mean, just the going down and seeing the non-hostile tentacles and being like, what is this shit?
Yeah. And really, really good. And just the fact that it's almost an entirely different level.
Yeah.
When you get down there, it is a very cool level. But that heart kind of haunting you the entire time.
Yeah.
Is just really fantastic. Good answers. I'm going to say, and I already talked about mine, but I'm going to talk about them now, or I already kind of foreshadowed them. So the music, I think the soundtrack in Demon Souls is probably my favorite in the group. Partly, I mean, it's hard for me to separate out because like the kind of bombastic choral stuff that they did in Dark Souls 1 didn't start out being kind of tedious to me. Mm-hmm. It became tedious as they continued to use it for every game and every boss. And started, there are subtle differences with Bloodborne, but for Dark Souls 1 through 3, pretty much the same thing. For boss fights, like it is very hard for me to pick out an individual one. Whereas Demon Souls, the music is queasy and kind of nauseating in a way that it isn't in the other parts of the series. Like these kind of rotten sounding, artificial sounding synths, kind of horns, like different instrumentation. Also, songs that have a real light touch. Like that happens in later entries, but like you look at something like The Fool's Idol, which is just really just kind of that chime that comes in for most of it until a melody comes in that's on that odd rhythm, with kind of weird emphasis. Like musically, I think it is has a much stronger identity than any of the other games.
And I think the small orchestra piece where it's like you get into Dark Souls and it's 20, 40 people. This is probably like 5 or 6. Yeah. And it feels lonely. It adds to it just because they have to be smart with what they're doing. They have to be compact. It just the actual set piece itself, or the actual orchestra itself, adds to the loneliness.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're really a lot of them are actually really simple compositions if you listen to them on their own. Which kind of has that stripped down like lonely feel, but they're just not afraid to be kind of sour and uncomfortable. And just the biggest thing, and I already mentioned this, but it can't really be overstated. Like I can tell them all apart.
Yep.
Like I can listen to one and be like, oh, this is this person. Whereas like definitely by like Dark Souls 3, I stopped being able to tell. Like if you were to play the Ancient Wyvern theme for me right now, I couldn't name what boss fight it was from. It just they all start to bleed together. That kind of stuff. Like
I just cut it in. I just cut it in. And you probably didn't notice that it was actually it was actually for a different boss.
Yeah, who even could tell, And compare that to something like the Adjudicator, which is all just like obese sounding, like obese horns. Like it actually does a job of evoking it. And the more I think about it, the more I think it's an expression of the fact that these bosses are kind of dorky and weird and bizarre more than they're trying to express power. When later games do that, it's very effective. It's just so rare. Like you look at something like very ethereal, like Gwendolyn or the Moonlight Butterfly, or most famously Gwyn's theme. But everything else is meant to like evoke power.
Yeah.
That's not the case here. The Adjudicator is a stumbling moron. Estrella is questionably, a good guy. They're not just trying to kind of express menace, and that's really cool to me. So, segueing, my second one is Maiden Estrella. That turn, the dialogue in that fight remains some of my favorite dialogue in the series.
Cruel Lord, what more can you possibly take from us? This is our home. Please leave quietly, lest you face the wrath of my loyal follower. You killed him, didn't you? Very well. I can no longer resist you. Do as you like. Take your precious demon soul. Dear Lord, you are too cruel. You have abandoned us. Is that not punishment enough?
Yeah, it is, to have a character, it felt very novel at the time to have a character actively questioning the player's actions like that. And kind of recasting, what you're ultimately doing, which is accumulating power. Regardless of whether it is to a good end, like you are plundering, like you're going into these areas, killing things to take their power. And her just, there's no plunder here. There's nothing for you. What are you doing? Yeah. Just feels very novel and cool to me.
You're specifically becoming the thing you're trying to stop.
Yeah. And to have a character tell you that.
The thing that kills her most of the time, unless you are some kind of miracle person, you can kill her first before killing Garl Vinland. You kill Garl Vinland, you take away her hope. That's what kills her.
Yeah. But she has that kind of clever, like, last little minute thing where she's like, I know to get to me you have been plagued. I'm going to keep talking, to kill you before, let that plague actually hit you. There's a little bit of that kind of like trap nature to it. But the fact that you just fight Garl Vinland, who is like a great visual design, but not particularly hard, and not particularly aggressive. Like, he doesn't chase you.
No, he just stands there.
Yeah, he's just trying to stop you from getting to her. It's a really cool little story. And you never feel more like a bad guy in these games than when you're fighting, you're killing Maiden Estrella. Yeah. So that sticks with me. Like, that is, and the music in that fight is so good.
Yes.
That just kind of harpsichord.
The arena, the babies.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And people just worshiping at the edge of the pit, where there's like very pristine, saint kind of figure is. Yeah. It's so clever to put that late in the game too.
Yeah.
Relatively, like, I know it's non-linear, but relatively late in the game after a very hard kind of area in 5.2, like, to have this kind of like gut punch. That's super valuable.
Of all the Berserk places, this place is the most.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. And then the last one, there's a couple different things. Like, my quick, tiny honorable mention is first appearance of Patches, because I love Patches. Yep. But I think I already talked about him in a previous one. And this is another gut punch, but I'm going to say finding True King a lot.
Yeah.
And having that anti-climax fight. This pathetic, kind of wretch. That is in front of you, like, right before you get to the end of this game, which is, we talked about it a little bit, but that kind of, that nihilism, nobody wants to go on. Like, this world is not worth saving.
So I don't mean to actually you at all.
Please do.
Just because you're probably going to get a tweet by the one person who's played Armored Core for answer. Mm-hmm. Patches, debatably, his first appearance was in Armored Core for answer. So there's, in the arena of that game, there is a pilot called Patch the Good Luck. And his in-game biography is, this independent mercenary has more history on the battle than most, piloting a strange-looking reverse-legged craft. His favorite combat strategy is to snipe from the air or from concealed locations to catch his opponents off guard. Which
so now,
feels...
I'm glad I didn't pick him as my thing, because I've been wrong.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
Didn't have to open fire. Yeah.
So yeah, I'll give it to the one true, the True King Allant reveal.
Yeah.
in this. Which is, again, I love in a game where they make you, there's absolutely no challenge to it, but it still makes you kill a thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You still have to do this.
Yeah.
It's not about it being a challenge. It's important that the player pull the trigger.
Yep.
On it.
Yeah. Capping that off with killing the maiden in black and then stepping on her face.
Her head, which is so brutal.
Oh, God.
Is a very, very brutal.
In case you're curious whether or not you're the bad guy in this scenario.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a very, very powerful and cool moment. But as always, it's not all wine and roses. Mitch, what are a couple of things that are not so great? And this doesn't have to be totally damning things, but what are a couple of things that you think are bummers?
Well, to sort of be the other side of the coin of the mysteriousness, one bummer that I have is the obtrusiveness. There's just such an obtrusiveness to the mechanics that I feel like could have been reworked without deterring or detracting from the overall game. I'm not really talking about the tendency or the PvP itself, but the functions around them. So, like, how can I tell if this is a pure white world tendency or just a white world tendency? And, fuck you if you can't tell the difference, and then you accidentally do something you're not supposed to do that makes it more black, or you kill the wrong NPC. And then it's, I can't summon my friends, or why can't I just summon my friends from PlayStation Network? Yeah. You can't tell me that would break the PvP lore.
Right.
Because at the end of summoning your friends, you're literally grading them A, B, C, or D. That they have this obtrusiveness, the mechanics that are already there that detract from the overall experience of the game. I mean, going back from the other Souls games, you can intuit that the boss souls are going to be used for something important. But if this is your first in the whole thing, you're going to just eat those things like they're candy. You're not going to know, I got to wait for the red hot demon soul because he's probably going to make some special weapons out of this. You have no idea that that's going to happen. And so it really breaks the game, not because of the mysteriousness, because of the obtrusiveness to the actual game mechanics.
Mm.
Sorry.
No, I was just agreeing with you.
Okay. The other bummer that I have is the upgrade economy. This is probably the only area that I would say is an unequivocal bummer for two specific reasons. Finding the stones, as we mentioned before, is stupid. The amount of time that I took to try and find a pure blade stone the first time, it was a little long. And on top of that, the amount of souls that it takes to level up, if you go down the wrong path, you could screw yourself out of a build and make the game way harder than it has to be, because you don't gain levels very fast in this one. You don't gain a lot of souls very, very quickly in this one unless you specifically grind a few spots. And the other side to that is once you do get sort of far enough on the upgrade mechanics, you all of a sudden obviate difficulty. Like if you can somehow get a +5 fire weapon at the end of 2-2, which you can, or 2-3 because you'd get the pure dragonstone, then the game is super easy for you. The challenge is gone, and there's no sort of gradual incline or gradual decline to difficulty. It's sort of, it gets tough, and then it sort of drops off. So that's why the upgrade economy is my other bummer.
Yeah.
You can also kind of obviate that difficulty with boss souls too.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty easy. So there's kind of a larger point of balance there, where like kind of my standard low friction playthrough of this game is to make the butcher's knife.
Yeah.
And it's so good. It like has double S scaling, and like, it just chews through everything.
That R2 cannot be denied.
Yeah. So like that kind of speaks into a uneven difficulty curve. Like it's very easy to obviate the difficulty for you, which is part of the reason why this is not that hard of a game, but it is, there are issues with it for sure.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, cool. What bums you out?
I've got two like enemies or encounters that are my bum outs. The first of which is kind of collectively the Black Phantom Mind Flayers in 3-2. I feel like those are put those are put specifically in places to really fuck you over, especially the one right before the Man-Eater. Yeah. Just they're a little bit too resilient. They are put in world geometry that is hostile toward trying to get around it. Yeah. I just I can kind of see what they were going for, but no, it ended up not having the intended effect, I don't think. And this will sound weird because it is in what I called my favorite area, but that rat pit in 5-1 is kind of a nightmare, and I'm happy they didn't do anything like that because no matter how thoroughly you think you've cleaned it out, there's always going to be one that'll come up and attack you, and you will be plagued, and that is, not the best thing to have happen, especially when that is the place where you're going to be having your fight with your first kind of massive plagued one or whatever it is. The gigantic enemies in 5-1 and in 5-2 that can kill you or one-shot you very easily. So yeah, like that I think is a combination of having very small enemies that are difficult to target unless you're doing an AoE, put right on top of and complicating a much harder encounter. No good.
It ties into Mitch's point about the soul economy being kind of tight as far as getting things during the levels, because you're near somebody who sells plague cures, but the plague cures I think cost 3,000 souls at that point, and like oftentimes I have not made nearly that much on my way there.
No, well,
so even if I could buy
like
one,
6.
Yeah, not much.
You don't get souls from levels in that game, so or from like inside levels. So yeah, it actually becomes a real bummer getting plagued there.
Yeah,
like there's a place to prepare yourself, but it's like, am I going to go grind to go do this? Am I not going to level up totally and risk bringing these souls here? Like no.
Yeah.
So yeah, that is a good bummer.
Yep.
I'm going to say first one, the boss run to King a lot. The unending elevator ride.
Yeah.
To no purpose.
With
like the ultimate
Snake Eater song playing in the back.
Yes, the unlimited elevator you sit through, the ladder you sit on. It is the ultimate thing that makes me think that long shitty boss runs are a design decision to make you rethink the fight, and that's always been the only argument in their favor. And playing through Hollow Knight put the nail in the coffin for that argument for me.
Yeah.
Where I now think that anything we might gain from that is not worth gaining. I just want to be able to try the boss again. Like maybe go through a shortcut, maybe dodge a couple enemies just so it's not so artificial, but making me just like, I'm not even dodging it. I'm not even fighting anything there. Like you're just waiting, and that enforced like go to your corner and think about what you did thing feels very condescending and shitty to me.
Well, not to mention there's a giant dragon before that. And if you want to take care of that dragon, you also have to do that time tax of the arrows.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And that sucks. That goes into my second one actually. Like, but yeah, it's a real bummer. So don't just tell me to just sit on an elevator and wait. Fuck you. Like I know I can get up and get a drink or something like that, but like I shouldn't have to. And then that goes into the second one, which is dragon fights in this game, which are somehow managed to be the worst in the series. The series that like is batting, 1 for 2 at best.
Right.
With dragon fights, like. And you don't even get a good reward from them. No. You get like a little crunchy soul that's worth a little bit. But I remember putting in the time to like kill one of these dragons with arrows. They didn't need to, but just to like get it killed, and getting the soul reward. And then like, oh man, I'm gonna take this to Ed and see what's up with it. And then nothing, and just being so disappointed that I put in so much tedium for so little reward. And the idea is they don't want you to do it.
Right.
They knew that putting nothing there would be too big of a slap in the face. But I would rather they just fly. You do enough damage, they fly off, and then you never have to deal with them again. Because they're ultimately not that interesting.
Yeah.
And how they express here.
Yeah.
It's the
one time they are standing between you and something worthwhile, they disappear because of world tendency. Yeah. Which is in 1-1.
You can actually get rid of them, as opposed to in 1-4 where like there's the two of them, the one on the bridge, which is kind of fine, but the one on the staircase, like the hitboxes aren't consistent enough on fire in this game to like. So many times I was edging up to make sure I could do the sprint. So I was trying to get to the very edge of the fire line, and the fire wouldn't even touch me, and I would just immolate.
Yep.
And it's just like, okay, I'll go bring all the fucking arrows and take care of this, or like, okay, I'll just heal up and just try this again, step back an inch. Like, it's just, they're not well designed. They're real broken and shitty.
Yeah.
So, and there's more of them that appear here than any other game in the series, excepting possibly 3, but they come up a lot.
Yeah.
Here. And that sucks. They're bummers.
Not a fan.
But they kept doing them, so somebody had to be a fan. There had to be somebody on the design team that was like, I like these dragons.
This time is going to be the time. I got a system.
Even the non-fight aspect of them is obviated in Dark Souls 1. Like, the Drake landing on the bridge is very cool. And that bridge fuck you that you can get, like, that's arguably good, arguably very bad, but it's very rarely has it killed me. Usually I just get flamed and I can make it to the stairwell, and it's kind of a good moment.
Yeah.
Right. Here it's like, it just doesn't, that stairwell with Bior, trying to make your way up to the penetrator. No, that's not up on the penetrator. That's making your way up to the elevator.
Yep.
To Old King Lot, is just not particularly good.
No.
So, but that's those are minor things ultimately, because I found that this in general has stood up very well for me.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun to go back to. I haven't touched it since we covered it for the show. So it was like going back to an old friend.
Yeah, I did most of a playthrough maybe 6 or 7 months ago, and then finished it, and then did 1-1 again, and fought a few of the bosses again. So between those 2 times, did a complete playthrough.
Yeah, it's like going back to an old friend, but he's still cool. Like he hasn't started listening to Alex Jones or something.
Yeah.
Interdimensional child molesters.
Pizzagate. Mitch, thank you for joining us.
Yeah.
On this revisit. Really do appreciate it. Where can people find you online?
Well, I haven't tweeted in probably legitimately 5 years, but I'm going to be dusting off my Twitter.
It's coming.
Yeah, it's coming. Krusty's going to be here. I'm going to be dusting off my Twitter pretty soon because of other personal projects. So if you're in the Slack, I'm Tdoggin, Tdoggin, which I go to sometimes. But on Twitter, I am at Mitch Benes, Benes. So yeah, that's where they can find
me. Yeah, recommend you check out that stuff. We really appreciate you supporting us and coming on the show and being generous with your time and support.
Yes.
Yeah, you guys are a real force for good. You talk about the forces of good and evil on Abject Suffering all the time. You should put yourself on the force of good sometime.
I always considered once that reckoning comes, us being kind of a Nuatu the Watcher figure.
Yeah.
Like where we come down, from the battlefield and watch, the Legos we set up get knocked out.
Yeah.
I'm still waiting for the I sent a text to accept the dark gift. I'm still waiting for that to come in the
mail. Is that like a folder that you get sent? I've never been clear.
I don't know, Gary's the one that was those.
Yeah, like vampire kit. Like just like a series of corners to hang around and hope.
It's got like this step by step. Step 1, put it in your neck.
Yeah. Take this pill.
It's like a pack of sea monkeys.
It's there's the red pill and the blue pill, but then you take the dark pill.
Yes.
And that's actually a thing. That's something that the black pill is a thing that internet incels talk about now. That's a new pill in the pill ecology of people online who I don't like that much.
I've heard of the gray pill before.
Yeah, the gray pill. Yeah. So people, there's a whole host.
It's a wonderful world that we live in.
It is. There's lots of good stuff too, including Demon Souls.
Yeah.
Next week, we'll be back with the 3rd episode of Bonfire Side Chat After Dark. It has caused some confusion, our naming convention, so I do apologize for that. It's going revisit episode and then response episode. It's going ping-ponging. 1 week after that, we're doing our episode on Dark Souls 1, and then our final episode reading your responses, specifically people who pledged at a tier at our Patreon be able to give us a prompt for Bonfireside Chat after dark.
Yes. So I will be sending out another reminder to people who were patrons as kind of a last call. And in addition to that, probably also opening it up for other for the wider audience, because we are kind of hitting the bottom of our well on these. So keep an eye out for that.
We're at the end. Like, everybody plays this Club Cranium. Yeah. Like,
so yeah, it's a good time.
Absolutely. Yeah. As much as I'm sad about the podcast ending, I am looking forward to talking about Dark Souls 1 again.
Me too.
And
there's been some concern expressed. I know not everybody listens to the end, and you're hearing the Nexus music, so you probably tuned out. The episodes are going to stay up and available. Some people really love going back and listening to old episodes. I'm not just saying that like as a hypothetical. People actually say that. The show isn't going anywhere. And if it gets to a point where we can't afford the X number of dollars a month to host this, it'll go up like on archive or something.
Yeah.
But that is very far off, like years and years.
That would be disaster striking.
Yes. That would be like literally we have to make choices between medicine or hosting the show.
Yeah. So that's that would be the Patreon totally bottoms out.
Right.
And the only thing we have the RGM money left to do are like one episode of File Underwater a year. We meet on Christmas Eve to record our least listened to show, and then put it in a bank teller, tube and send it off. So that is very unlikely to happen. But we'll do some kind of bookkeeping and deck clearing at the beginning of the next episode, so people know. Yeah. For people who tune out.
Yeah.
Like we'll let everyone know. So and if you want to support us, you can go to patreon.com/Duckfeed.tv. Even though this show is ending, the network is going really strong. We're very close to a new show, milestone goal, which is a love and relationship podcast called Heartbeat City, that I've wanted to do for about a year or so now. I'm really looking forward to. We also have just recently met our goal to do a celebratory tabletop session, which we're going to be doing this month.
Yep.
Watch social media channels for details. But if you want to pop on there and support us, that is a huge deal. We really do appreciate it.
Very much so.
I think that's it.
I think that's it. Man, next to last time we're doing this main episode.
Yeah. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah.
Mitch, thank you again.
Yeah. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah. And until next time, what should they do, Cole?
They should... one second, because I had this dialogue open before, and I forget how it goes.
Umbasa.
And we all pray that we will have far more soon.
All right, everybody beveraged up?
I am.
Yeah.
All right.
If we need to go to the bathroom, do we just raise our hand and say, I need a potty break?
You just cut in and say, hey, can I take a break real quick?
Send Cole an Amber Alert for the real golden stuff. Yes.
Jeez.
I have to go.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
All right.
I'm being held hostage by Bonfireside Chat.
I have to pee, but they won't let me go until I tell them what I think of the adjudicator.
It's a really good bus. I really have to go.
Yeah. We decided, but we gotta go.
You fool. Can't you see I don't want to go on?
You step on my head on the way to the bathroom.
Okay. My name is Gary Butterfield.